Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second workshop in the long-term plan. And I'm sort of hoping that everyone else has read the 170 pages in the material I've read more yet. So looking forward to be guiding through the next 3 hours. And like mentioned, and pass over to Penny. Are you leading on this?
I think Ian's just going to do an intro.
Okay.
Yeah, I will just merely introduce that obviously we are one steering group too. So I won't be doing much talking today, but what we will be covering off is I'll be handing back to Penny in a sec to go through infrastructure strategy. And wrapped into the same component or same presentation around infrastructure strategy will be the second follow-up around the CapEx prioritisation approach. So we'll deal with both of those topics in the same part of the workshop. And then we'll hand over to Catherine and Patty, I guess, to go through financial strategy and in particular looking at some of the key financial appetite questions. And then we'll be handing over to Marie will be here, where we'll be looking at the community funding policy and the community investment space. So yeah, that's today's agenda. And back to Penny.
All right, so the first item is about the infrastructure strategy and how that flows together with the approach for prioritisation for the long-term plan. So what we're setting out today and what we are attempting to do this time with the long-term plan, based on the lessons learned exercise from the last long-term plan, was to make sure that we gave adequate time up front for discussion about the infrastructure strategy and the long-term 30-year view of what's necessary across the district to deliver on our strategic intent and to manage our issues before then flowing into the long-term plan conversation. So what you'll see here is a more integrated view of looking at the 30 years through to the 10 years of the LTP than those of you who were here last time would have seen. So this was done a bit round the other way last time, and I think times before that. So the purpose of today's session is to give you an overview of that process. It's not to go through every step of the process. You should see as we move through the presentation, there are date indicators of when the workshops are going to focus on particular parts of the process. It's really just giving you an overview of what the process is, and then having a bit more time to focus on the first 2 steps of the process, which is what we really need to kind of set the direction for the rest of it. And those 2 areas are significant issues and significant decisions. So you'll have to forgive me for some of the language while we talk about the infrastructure strategy. The infrastructure strategy is a requirement of the Local Government Act. So in the briefing materials, you got the actual words from the Act. The actual words aren't that helpful. So they are what they are, and they represent what we need to legislatively do. What we have tried to do is we've tried to weave together an actual strategic decision-making process with the legislative requirements in a way that is sensible, because you can go down some rabbit holes and round in circles if you try and follow the logic through the legislation. So we got to a logical flow for doing that last time, which we worked through with the auditors, which the auditors were happy with and had no comments on. So we're kind of following the same, we're proposing to follow the same structure and flow. We are just starting it much earlier and going from the first step before the LTP this time. So the key things, the purpose of an infrastructure strategy is about setting the long-term direction for how we're going to manage and invest in infrastructure over time. And it's based in what are the major issues and decisions that we are going to have that are going to shape that investment. So what are the issues that we have now? How are we going to manage those issues? And what decisions do we need to make that are going to drive how we manage those issues? So in that respect, it sets out a framework for both our long-term investment indications, so intentions, and our shorter term 10 years is not short term, and the direction for our 10-year investment program. So what I'll do is I'll just walk through each of these steps, and you can, I'll stop on each one and you can ask me a question, but I might put a pin in the question if it's going to be answered by the next step. Everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Cool. So one of the, the legislation sets out what types of infrastructure are covered by the infrastructure strategy. So it must include flood protection, flood control works, roads and footpaths, which is quite a weird list. And it may include other infrastructure at our discretion. So with the last infrastructure strategy, we went beyond the mandatory requirements and we included all transport and social infrastructure as well, so that we had a more holistic view of how infrastructure supports growth, resilience, wellbeing across the district. And we're going to continue with that approach. So obviously, previously, water services infrastructure was included in the infrastructure strategy. So going forward, we are no longer able to include water infrastructure to the same extent that we include it for other infrastructure. So the water services strategy has exactly the same requirements as are here for the infrastructure strategy for water. They will sit in the water services strategy. But what we can do under the LGA is to include information on water services infrastructure where it supports integrated infrastructure planning. And so that's what we're planning on doing. So when we get into the next stage, as we move through the next stages, I'll highlight where the key interface points are for water. But for the most part, they sit in the growth space. So we want to ensure that the infrastructure that is being planned across the district to support growth is integrated between water and other infrastructure. So that's one of the key interface points, as well as the decisions that you make in terms of how we're investing, how we're supporting growth, how we're investing in growth, that those need to be the same as base assumptions for QLDC as they do for the water services entity. So we see that being one of the key integration points, probably through the statement of intent to the water services strategy. Any questions about that? So what I'll do is I'll run through the process and then we'll come back to talking about the significant issues themselves and the significant decisions. In the briefing paper you had accompanying this, there's more detail that is this is what we're using internally to help us move through this process, and I've included a worked example in there, just noting that the example in the briefing paper is not actual, just, it's just representative so that I can put something in front of you so you can see how it works. I did note that the example of the 30-year blob picture had somehow turned it into mathematical formulas. So if anyone, if anyone's actually interested in that example, I've reprinted that page because I just noticed that this morning. Apologies for that.
I don't know if it's a government language.
Yeah, it's a real example in that it's just total gibberish. Right, so the significant issues are the major long-term challenges and pressures that will materially affect how we provide infrastructure over the next 30 years, and that are the key drivers of infrastructure investment. So these are the problems we need to solve at the macro level in relation to our infrastructure. So that's significant issues. Significant decisions identify the key infrastructure areas where we need to make deliberate choices about major infrastructure investment to manage significant issues and deliver on strategic intent. So this is where we are weaving together the infrastructure strategy requirements of the LGA with an actual strategic decision-making process, because obviously when you are looking at long-term investment and strategy, the problems you need to solve are part of the picture, but also we have set aspirations for ourselves and we've committed to those with the community via a range of strategies and through the spatial plan. So this is where we kind of bring together what are the issues we're trying to solve, the problems we're trying to solve, and what are our aspirations. And so the significant decisions are essentially the extent to which we invest in key areas of infrastructure. So these broadly will align with the activity areas that are heavy in infrastructure, with the exception of we've got specific decision areas related to the environment and resilience, which are a bit more which are a bit broader. But when we get to the significant decisions themselves, I can go through that in a bit more detail.
Can I ask a question at this point? I'm just wondering, the significant decisions, I've had a look at what some of the other councils do, and our significant decisions seem to be very, they're not actually decisions. So when I ran through Auckland's last night, it was like, how are we going to deal with these waterfront issues? How are we going to deal with various other things? And they were quite specific. I'm trying to understand, I mean, obviously the auditors ticked us off, and it was a unique way of doing it last time, but I think what the Act requires us to do is, if we go back to that, the scenario thing, we have to present the most likely scenario. We don't have to present all the scenarios.
We do have to consider the principal options for every significant decision.
So yeah, so there's a difference between the scenarios and the decisions. And I'm just trying to.
This is the circular logic of the Act, whether the scenarios precede the decisions or which way round they go. If you follow the logic in the Act, it is quite circular. So it took us quite a long time to land on this being the way to do it. You could, other people do it based on the significant decision is a specific project. Now, we explicitly didn't want the infrastructure strategy to be about projects, and it's not supposed to be. So it's not intended to be about individual projects. The infrastructure strategy is supposed to be higher level to set your direction so that when you're doing your LTP process, you can then say, what are the actual projects we need in order to deliver on this strategic intent? So there's many ways you could cut this process. This is the way that we have landed on the basis that we only looked at it 18 months ago when we signed off the existing infrastructure strategy.
I get that this might be quite, I don't know, it might be a triggering question because a lot of effort has gone into it. I'm just trying to understand, what I would like to see is a really usable infrastructure strategy that is easy to grasp and makes sense of. For each of these areas, we've got 4 different scenarios all the way through, and I just wanted to test at this point whether we've kind of got that right and whether it provides clarity on some of the big decisions that we are going to have to make. For example, water. If I was looking at Auckland and they had a decision like ours to make around what's your strategy for dealing with wastewater disposal across the district, I believe they would probably put that in their significant decisions category. I'm wondering how we do that with the way we've structured it.
So if we were responsible for water under this strategy, there would be a significant decision in here relating to our strategic direction for water, like there was last time.
Yeah.
We can't make that decision in our infrastructure strategy, as an example, because that is one of the decisions that is not our.
I realise that. I'm just saying that level of decision isn't captured in the way that we've done it. It's somehow a higher level than that, and it doesn't provide clarity around the decision time. So one of the requirements in the Act is we have to put a decision time in around the significant decisions. When will we have to make it, and what will it cost? When you go conceptual, you can't do that. So I can just say that and just leave it there. Because then it flows through to what do we call our significant decisions? What are they going to be? What level do they sit?
So the significant decisions here are intentionally higher level because they're related to the options you're going to select. So the decision is the extent to which you are investing in a circular economy, or you are just preserving our current approach.
But that means I think what you're saying is that the decision is around option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, and how you choose the most likely scenario. That's not to me how the Act is structured. To me, the Act is structured that we choose the most likely scenario, and in that context is the wording, we set out the major decisions. So the major decisions aren't choosing the scenario, that gets done earlier. And then within the context of the most likely scenario, we go, what are the big decisions? I think that's what the Act says.
Yes. And so this is the circular kind of thinking in the Act that you can easily interpret in multiple ways. So we worked through this with the auditors last time. The way that we've done this complies with the Act because the auditors are happy with it. So if we wanted to change the way we did that and go to significant decisions being at a much more granular level, that is a significant change. And the intent of doing this first is to have it at a higher level. So I would pull back a bit and just think what we're looking at here is the areas we need to make strategic decisions in, and being clear what our strategic decision-making framework is within each of those areas. You then use that to choose your projects for the LTP. So if you just kind of, cross your eyes a little bit, that's what we're trying to achieve, rather than going down the project-based decision-making path in the infrastructure strategy, because that is not the intent of the infrastructure
I don't think it's to do every little project level decision. I think it's what are the significant decisions. That's what it asks us to do. So what are the key, most significant? There will be others within that. And I get where you're coming from. I think there's another way. We have principles around how we, anyway, it's a big discussion. I just don't know. We never had it last time. We didn't really understand how it was being framed. The infrastructure strategy came at us at the very end after we had done the CapEx program. Councillors haven't sort of had any input into how we, into this, because what we've done is very different, I think, to what other councils do, which is why maybe the auditor had to be talked through it.
Oh, well, it didn't need to be talked through it.
So I think what
they needed us for it, actually.
It's just a question of.
If I could just interrupt briefly, I think it would be helpful if Fanny was able to, because we're talking through the process, but I think some of us might be struggling to
Understand the conversation.
do that.
Yeah, we can.
So it would probably be helpful to pick a topic, whether it's community infrastructure or whatever, notwithstanding we're moving away from the three waters. So something nice and safe like community infrastructure, where we can talk about it happily, and run through that. I think it's covered in the briefing papers, but it is, from a personal point of view, it is highly conceptual. So, and I think we all need to think, well, how would we decide this or that and be able to understand it? That I think would, but yeah.
Okay, so if I just finish talking through the process, do you want to then talk through the example that's in the briefing paper?
I think so.
Because the intent of this is to give you a framework to then make the more detailed decisions within as you go through the next stage of the process. And that is the intent of an infrastructure strategy as well. The LTP is where you make the major decisions about the specific investments that you are making in the next 10 years, because the infrastructure strategy is direction setting. So if we just move through the process and then we come back to the example. The next step, so this step and the options step kind of sit alongside each other. They're shown as in an order here, but they really sit alongside each other. So the first thing that will happen is that in each of the significant decision areas, we will identify a high-level unconstrained 30-year view of investment needs. And this is at a high level. So this is the blogs on a page version here. This isn't down in the detail of every project with all of the detail that you'll get through the LTP process. This is the key strategic interventions that are needed to deliver on our strategic intent and to address the issues. And so this is essentially a long list over 30 years. And because it's 30 years, some of those things are going to be not defined in detail because this is a 30-year view. It'll be broadly grouped into the things that we think would be in the first 10 years versus in the next 20 years. And alongside this, we would present to you the renewals approach, outlining the investment required to sustain assets and services. So this is, again, a bit different to what we've done in the past, where the renewals, some of the major projects on the CapEx list for the LTP are renewals. But there's a lot of smaller pieces of work scattered throughout the LTP that are about renewals. And what we are planning on doing this time is for each of those key activity areas, presenting this is how we approach renewals. So showing you the methodology and approach, and here's the renewals profile for 10 and 30 years before you get into the LTP process. So that'll happen at this stage. So the options stage is then identifying essentially different approaches to to delivering those infrastructure needs. So we have the issues that we need addressed. We have the strategic aspirations that we want to reach. What are the different options for investing in those? And they're usually, what we did last time is they're kind of on a spectrum from maximise what we've got through to do the platinum standard thing, but they're different for each area because they're dependent on the specific strategic aspirations we have in those areas. And that's where we would also explore different approaches to renewals, levels of service and growth. In fact, growth is one of the significant decision areas. So how we invest in growth is one of the areas that you'll spend quite a lot of time looking at when we get to the options. So that preferred option, and then you'll select a preferred option in each of these areas, and that will then set the parameters for the LTP prioritisation. So that's the option that you will then take into what you'll be presented in terms of the LTP projects. And obviously we can't do everything. So you will have seen the 30-year list and our indication of what should be in the first 10 years. Initially, that might change when you select a preferred option. That might move some things that we put in the 20-year bucket back into 10 years and things in 10 years out to 20 years. And then you will see, so you'll be presented back a 10-year view in each of the areas based on the preferred option, but we'll also include scenarios to test different choices around renewals, levels of service and growth. For example, you might see a transport scenario which is, this is our recommended renewals approach. If you want to reduce the spend on renewals, it could be reduced in this way, and that would have this impact in terms of risk. So you'd be, you would see the trade-offs you would need to make. There will be areas where there's a very obvious level of service lever that can be pulled, and so there will be scenarios presented in terms of this is your preferred option, but if you wanted to particularly focus on decreasing or increasing levels of service in this area, this is what that would look like and the risks associated with it. So in terms of the LTP prioritisation, last time we talked about the fact that it was, we were focusing in that renewals level of service growth. So what it means is you're going to get scenarios as opposed to here's one list, what we think. There'll be different combinations of things in each of these areas. And it'll be for you to determine which of the levers you want to pull and which of those scenarios reflects the your aspirations and your tolerance for risk. We're also going to try and bring in the risk appetite that was set late last or mid last year into this decision-making process too, because if we've set a risk appetite for averse on something, for example, then that will have to flow through into this decision making. So then you'll look at those scenarios and select the one that you want to take forward into the LTP. That then essentially flows back and represents our most likely scenario under the infrastructure strategy, which is that's. So before we go into talking about the significant issues and significant decisions, if everyone's got the briefing paper, I'll see if I can open that actually.
So quick question.
Yep.
So the briefing paper has got all the different likely scenarios, options, and then the different size blocks of first few years, medium term year. Are those illustrative, or are they what staff think where we should be?
Note that example in here is illustrative. Right. This is not what we. It's
it's for the transport infrastructure, the community infrastructure. There's lots of all those different groups. So those, I'm just wondering why they're all replicated with a lot of detail in that, or is that the framing for what we're going to talk about?
Or no, I think what you're talking about is the so this is sorry, I thought that was clear. This is the last year's infrastructure strategy.
Yeah.
So this is the 2024 infrastructure strategy. Sorry. So this is what we currently have in our infrastructure strategy. So what I'm going to run through is an example, which is the one, hang on, sorry, I'll just share the screen. I don't know why that sidebar is not disappearing. What's annoying? So it is, I mean, this whole process is complex and it's difficult. It takes time for us to get our head around and to be able to pull it into a logical format that we can actually follow through this process. Happy to spend as much time as you need to talk on this. Yeah. So the example that we can talk through.
So all those pages from 40 odd gram to about 100, just a cut and paste of the last.
Yes, that's the 2024 strategy.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So if we take the waste as an example, so the first thing that we would do, I'll put these in the wrong order, is so what are the impact of the significant issues in relation to waste? And we have 5 significant issues at the moment. So then we think about how does that play out for waste? So the first thing is increasing standards. So this was one of our key significant issues from last time, which we worked through with the previous council at the beginning of the process. So this plays out for waste in the fact that there is a New Zealand waste strategy that sets out a new framework with higher expectations about how we will minimise waste, reduce carbon emissions and move towards a circular economy. The previous government had gone down a path of embedding that in legislation. The current government has pulled back a bit from that, but there's still a definite increasing of standards and expectations in this space. So in the case of waste, we have a waste management and minimisation plan that was approved only late last year. I worked with the waste team when they developed this to make sure that it was hooked into our strategic framework and that it flowed through in terms of good practice, reflection of objectives and flowing through into the actions. So what we have there is the council has committed to a strategic vision, strategic intent for waste. So waste, the extent to which we move towards a circular economy is essentially the significant decision. And the context for that is all of those issues, but in particular, for this illustrative purpose, that there are increasing expectations that will do so from being set by government, and that we have set a waste minimisation plan with our community that commits to moving towards a circular economy. So that plan has objectives in it, it has measures that we've agreed to measure ourselves by, and it has a range of actions for us and for us supporting the community to move towards that.
Are we going to go through just the significant issues that have changed? That's just a way to contextualise some of that, right?
We haven't got to that, but yeah, I'm just talking through this as an example, but we'll come back to the significant issues themselves.
So how do we put the time frame in there? So this comes back to my how specific is the decision, and because it's by all decisions, we're just talking about the significant ones, and significance is defined. So how do we put a time frame on that? Because we're required to. The extent to which we move towards. So when
the time frame is set out by the option that we choose, because that shows how quickly we move towards a significant decision. Move towards a circular economy.
It's the time frame on when we make the decision. Okay.
So the auditors were happy with how we set this out in terms of its compliance with the legislation. This sets out timeframes for delivering the things. We're making the decision on the extent to which we invest in a circular economy by approving this infrastructure strategy.
And the
waste minimisation plan itself, you've already committed to.
Then the decision is made.
The decision is the extent to which you invest in it, because the waste minimisation strategy, you did not agree any investment, you did not commit any money to implementing it.
And those decision points are at the point where you invest, so they're at the LTP stage.
Yeah, so so the most likely scenario shows the points at which, so it's the LTP decision and the infrastructure strategy decision.
Steve, do you-
Otherwise, you're not making a decision here at all. You're just saying, here are some future decisions that somebody else has to make. So we went round this, we went round exactly this merry-go-round of thinking when we landed on this approach. Because
we weren't involved in that, and I guess that's, so I'm really sorry that you're having to do it now, but I think we never went through the merry-go-round with you. It just got presented to us
I think
at the end, and that's not fault of
no,
it was how
but this is actually a step to maturity that we started the conversation with you in the last LTP, if you recall. So in some regards, you have been part of the way this has evolved. And I think I'm sorry, Penny, because this is the most phenomenal piece of work that you have. It's a real maturity that we've never had before. It's been lauded by the auditors, and I guess it's a lot to get used to. Because it is complex, but it's actually going to give you a framework to make really well-informed decisions based on policy.
And I guess where I'm coming from is because it's about usability, and if we could use it, and if we had used it since the LTP, I could understand it, but at its value. But we haven't at this level used this infrastructure strategy to inform our decisions. And I'm going, why is that? Is it usable? Does it deliver value? How could we tweak it to make sure it does?
So the infrastructure strategy isn't so much about setting strategy. It's about how you set the framework for investing in strategies effectively you've already committed to. We've already committed to the spatial plan, the waste minimisation plan, the community facility strategy. The infrastructure strategy isn't the place where you reset those strategic decisions. It's how you set the decision-making framework about how you're going to invest in delivering on those strategies, which is why my early comment about the legislation and trying to weave together a proper strategic decision-making process with what we're required to do in the legislation. Because if we follow exactly the path so in terms of making the timing on the decision, which was your original question,
I just feel like we need to be able to have some feedback on this, and it's quite strong pushback. And I just want to be able
just like to, because I think it'd be really helpful if you're able to verbalise what the concern is behind the framework.
I think for me,
I'm struggling to.
For me, the concern is that there are a lot of words, but we don't. When I read through other infrastructure strategies, there are some quite concrete, significant issues with the actions that they're taking to address them. There are some quite concrete, significant decisions with the time at which they will be taken, and all of that is set out quite clearly, and I can see that it's quite usable. I understand that this is a strategic level thing. I think what I would like to understand is the value of this. There's a lot of words in this document. They're not bullet pointed with actions, and there's a lot of every decision has a lot of paragraphs around it, and I struggle to see how it's used and to use it myself. And maybe that just needs a little bit more familiarization. Maybe we just need to take a little bit more time.
So I think what you're seeing in the back is the output. That's not the process, and we're not going through each of these decisions today. When we talk about the significant issues, which we're going to get to, we're going to talk about those in detail. We're going to then talk to you.
We keep going, and then maybe it will become.
We're then going to talk to you about, in each of these decision areas, how do the significant issues affect it, and therefore what actions do you need to take. So in each significant decision area, that link from issue to action will be there. That is steps. That's the step that is going to come to you in May.
I wonder if it might, it's super complex. I know
Yeah.
my mind went into it.
Yeah, it is
Now,
complex.
I wonder if we let Penny just step through the example of the waste minimisation.
Just before we do
Just
this,
to
Steve was trying to say
Well,
something.
that's exactly what I was about to ask. Is from my perspective, I can't pull it apart unless I understand it, and so I'd just like it to continue working through the briefing and understanding the process that Penny's proposing at this stage, so that I can get my head around it.
And I just have a brief question around the slide that's on the screen at the moment. So the one that was about risk appetite. So, and I'm just trying to put it down to a concrete example, I suppose, is that when it says compliance, we have a conservative risk appetite. What does that mean? And you know, dare I say, I'm going to put wastewater discharge in compliance with our discharge consents on this. We've had obviously had issues. We've had spillages and various things over the years. Mostly without consequence, and some of them have big consequences as well. I'm not going to, but mostly they have little consequence. But what's our appetite for, you know, investing and avoiding in those, and as an organisation is, and I don't know what you mean when it says conservative. I suppose is
so that's what we'll bring through in this. If you look at the footnote, it's defined what it stands for. So this is the risk appetite that was adopted by council in, I think it was July last year, as part of this policy. So conservative risk appetite means low willingness to accept uncertain outcomes, will accept an option that puts objectives at risk only if essential and limited possibility of failure, and willing to trade off against achievement of other objectives with extreme reluctance. So that's from the risk policy.
So just remind me, what is there a level above that?
Yes. Adverse, which is extremely low willingness to accept uncertain outcomes. We'll always select the lowest risk option, which is one of the reasons why we're bringing it in here, because we've set an appetite that says for things we say are adverse, we have an adverse risk appetite too. We will always accept the lowest, select the lowest risk option, and never willing to trade off against achievement of other objectives.
I suppose what I'm trying to understand, are these the areas in which we set the investment priorities by determining what level of risk appetite we have in different areas for the strategy, like compliance or like you know, environmental outcomes through waste minimisation or
well, essentially,
biodiversity.
The council set this appetite. So what we're saying is we're just picking it up out of the risk policy, and including it in here to inform you when you're considering the approach to take to investment, and then actually with the individual projects as well, we'll be using it.
Just a little a note just before Penny moves through the piece here. There are a number of ways to skin this cat, as you've identified from across the country. The approach that Penny suggested here, I do think a lens through which you'll need to look is the level of change we're going to have over the next few years. So we really need strategic documents that have some longevity and some ability for us to be flexible within it, or have some durability. So in some respects, we want to make sure that our specificity is always sat in the right place, so that we're not working across 5 different documents to adjust as changes come through the system. So that's just a lens to cast across really everything that we're doing with regards to the LTP, but sort of having an element of change readiness to the way that we're working through this would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So just continuing to go through the example, what we would do at that step that I've called significant decisions, we would identify the issues, and we would identify the strategic intent that we've already set. So in the case of waste, we had a waste minimisation plan. In the case of other significant decision areas, we've got other agreed strategies or government direction, which comes in here as well. So at this point, we would then go, okay, if we are going to manage these issues to the extent that we want to, and we're going to deliver on these objectives, what are the things we would need to do? What are the investments we would need to make at a strategic intervention level? And so what you then get out of that is this, we also identify the risk, is this blobs on a page, which you can't see because it's translated it into Arabic for some reason.
But we have a paper.
Yeah, so you should have a paper of that. So what this is, and we can present this however you like. So we could have this mapped to the significant issues and to the WMP objectives. Essentially, the thing that you'll see at the end of it is blobs on a page. They can be linked, they are linked back to. So what we're saying is, if you were going to manage these issues and you were going to deliver on this strategic intent, what are all of the things we would need to do? Not constrained. So we're not bringing you a list of the things we think we can afford or the things that we think are best. We're saying these are the things that would need to be done to manage these issues and to deliver on the strategy that you've already committed to. And so one of the reasons that we have incorporated this here is the feedback from you earlier in this process about wanting to understand the extent to which we are investing in our strategies. So this was where we thought that that was the best place to bring it in, because those strategies, obviously we have a lot of strategies that have action plans associated with them, and those action plans are often not budgeted for. They're not reflected in our investment program. So what we're trying to do this time is to bring through all of those key strategies and show the extent to which we would need to invest to deliver on those. So then at the next stage,
Just before we, so I can understand, so
Yep.
the blobs.
Yep.
All of it. That's just a list that comes about. If the sequencing of them will be, some of them will be time dependent, obviously, and interrelated. Is that sequencing then, that's not related to available capital or anything, that's just,
no, this is
that's just one of the
unconstrained.
logical, but what determines the sequencing?
So that's the next step,
Okay,
or the next two steps.
okay, it's a
So for example, if I just, hang on, I have to go back a step with this. So we've got, those are all of the things to deliver on that and that. I'll put these in the wrong order here. So then we say, and this is the example from our existing infrastructure strategy. We have different options for the extent to which we can manage the issues and invest in our strategic aspirations. So we can basically just maintain what we've already got. We can focus specifically on emissions reduction, which is one of the things from the waste government direction and from our minimisation strategy. It's one of the kind of pillars. Or we can focus more fully on moving towards a circular economy, and then we can protect for all possibilities. So this is a continuum where essentially you're doing the minimum, you're focusing just on emissions, then you're focusing on emissions and minimising what's going into the landfills. And then the fourth option is we assume we're moving towards a circular economy, but we don't do it fast enough, and therefore we still need to get a new landfill. And so obviously this comes with more detail about what each of these options are. So on your 30-year picture, you'll see in the year in 20 to 30, it includes a replacement for Victoria Flats landfill, because that's option 4. Now that, at this point, this is just all of the things that might be necessary. You then decide which of these we want to aim for, and we then put that into a more logical version of the blobs on a page into a 10-year and longer term picture. And in this case, the Victoria Flats landfill replacement goes all together because we're investing in option 3, so we don't need a new landfill in 30 years. Again, this is illustrative. I'm not saying these are the actual decisions.
For illustrative purposes then, would it help, because particularly with the new purpose of local government in the bill,
Yep.
suggests it makes a distinction between services, facilities and infrastructure. It might help if the things that are services were identified as such and facilities were, colour coded, so you can, because these are activities, whereas this is investment in hard, infrastructure. So that might help. But I'm also wondering if some of it, we'll probably need an opportunity to go back and I presume you're going to go to look at what some of these statements are about what the significant issues are.
Yes, so that's what we're going to do after we've gone through the process. We're going to come back to the significant issues themselves. Thank you. So you'll see some ratings here. So we have what we're planning on assessing that against is the extent to which the option aligns with the risk appetite, achieves the strategic intent, addresses the significant issues, meets expected service performance standards, and cost. So that's just a way of identifying, distinguishing between them on the basis that those are the key drivers for our investment. So as I say, we then pick the preferred option, and go away and apply that. And what we then come back with is, you will then see it next when we get to the CapEx program for the LTP. Now, I've only shown one scenario here, but there could be a combination of scenarios. You'll get multiple scenarios depending on the different area that we're looking at.
We have the opportunity to look at, so the scenario with the issues and then the proposed options
Yep.
within that. What are the options in the options? So to achieve what you want to against the issues, you know, so therefore we've got something like a landfill, for example.
Yeah.
Well, what are the other options that might be available? That A, might not be a local solution, could be a regional solution. So, or incineration, as is, I'm not suggesting that, but it is an option out there. At least some local authorities and developers, investors are keen on those. So where do those weighing up what the options are come into that?
Well, that comes into that previous step. So it depends on how far out you're looking and what the type of thing is you're looking at, because the blob might just say replacement for Victoria Flats landfill with no specificity of the solution. If we're looking at year 25, that's what it will be. If we know it's something that need to do with year 3, it'll be a more specific project.
Sure.
So the blobs at this point would not be solutions for the longer term stuff. They would be solve this problem.
Right. So further out,
Yeah.
there is less certainty.
Yes.
Cool. That's fine. That's fine.
Because you don't, the infrastructure strategy is not the place to make that decision. You make that decision when you go into the detailed process of what are our options, which one are we going to pick, and then let's start.
Cool. So therefore the language then needs to be chosen in such a way that doesn't lead people to think that his
Yes.
decisions are already made.
Yeah,
And
Because these,
which is why the decisions aren't necessarily higher level, because you're not making, this is not making the specific decisions about the type of the actual thing you're going to invest in.
Yeah.
Because you're doing that in the LTP and in your actual business case processes for individual projects.
Sure. Right.
so what we're doing is we're taking the
Strategic
frame,
direction.
sort of framing.
Yes.
So presumably,
Sorry.
if we then say, well, actually, if our appetite or risk appetite on a particular thing changes, all the different growth scenarios change, all those blobs that move around.
Yes.
That's a political.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're able to
Yeah.
to look at that.
Yeah, and so for example, in the waste minimisation space, in the 10 years, in the waste minimisation plan, there are some interventions that are talked about where when the waste minimisation plan was developed, we knew that there wasn't funding to do that in the 10 years. And so they've got an action which is to develop a business case for a certain thing. So for example, how to deal with the problem of construction waste. So you might look at this and say, okay, well, actually we've got a solution for construction waste, no specified solution, but what we do about construction waste sitting out in years 20 to 30, but you might decide that that is so important that you want to bring that into the later years of the LTP. It's not in, it might not be what officers put forward, but you might want to bring that forward. Again, that'll be a blob that says, which is what this says in Arabic, construction waste. Solution. Without specifying what it is.
I mean, this is meant to be an incredibly useful tool to help you to make an informed decision.
Because we don't normally put all of this information in front of you before you're then asked to look at the 10-year investment program. So we're trying to provide all of that context that we normally do behind the scenes before we give you that. We're trying to make it
I
visible.
think that's useful. Like, I get it. I'm not saying it's not a useful tool for decision making. I'm just saying that these aren't decisions that we're going to make over time. These decisions are made when we agree the strategy. They're already made. We've decided on the options with it, and we've decided on the framework. And it's helpful for deciding what goes where, but they're not the significant decisions we're going to make over the length of the LTP. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? You've made them already. You've agreed your strategy. They're very useful for developing the plan, but I think there's another layer, which are what are the significant decisions we are going to be making. So it's not to say that it doesn't work. I think there's
Well,
another piece.
what we could do is on each of these major interventions, we could just put an indicator that shows you will need to make this decision in years 1 to 5. Well, in this 5-year period, this 5-year period, this 5-year period,
Well,
on what the actual solution is.
sure, but there's also there's a critical path to even getting to that point of
Yeah.
making a solution, things that need to happen with
Yeah.
consultation or.
Yeah.
So now that's a whole other level of work.
Yeah.
And that's not the infrastructure strategy's job to do that.
No, but what it does is it gives us a runway. It highlights the really key things that are going to alter other things, because there are big decisions we make that have massive opportunity costs. And I think those are the things that we need to highlight. I think this is really useful for developing the blobs and our scenarios. But I do think there is an additional layer, which is these are the big things we're going to have to do. And that gives the councillors and the community the ability to see what's coming and to, I just feel like, and then those things have time frames.
Yeah. So I think we need to come back to that. I'm not 100% sure how to, keeping in mind that we do this process, we start talking to you about it again every 18 months. So actually what we want to do this time is to set out a really robust pathway that doesn't have to be revisited each time. So we're trying to build here on what we did last time, because, and we could do the same with the LTT to a certain extent, because as you'll see for the next 10 months workshops, you know, having that base on which we can build is really important.
Yeah.
Is it something to do with the handover or sort of the bridge that goes between the strategy and the 10-year plan? Because I'm just wondering if what you're pushing to there, I completely understand why we need visibility in that, but I'm just wondering whether that really sits in the strategy or whether it's
I think those are
plan development.
I think those are the significant decisions because the Act puts in a time frame. I think that's what it's getting at. I think these things are, I think we have our key issues. There are key conceptual directions that help inform the scenario, because the scenario is made up of, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 for each of these key decisions. I think they form the most likely scenario, and then within that there are going to be key decisions.
Maybe one thing we can do, Ian's just come up with a really good suggestion to assist, is to perhaps just put the process on a one page, so that you can actually see how it's going to work from this point to the LTP.
It's on a page there already. I think the more useful, I know what Nikki's talking about, because Jessie and I spent days and days in a room trying to make sense of the same thing. It's about the significant decision, the options about how you make the significant decision. Do they inform it or do they come out of it? And the timing, the date is attached to when you have to make the significant decision. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and these feel like, I don't know, a more complex, intelligent version of dealing with the significant issues and developing the scenario, and the decisions are.
It feels, if I can jump in, because I think I know what you're saying as well, and I understand because you know, from government's perspective, this feels quite operational, and it feels like the framework that you use in order to provide good advice, which is what's good from our perspective to understand. What I think Nikki's trying to articulate is as well, like us having more direction on those, or giving more direction on the significant issues and the sort of intent of where to go. But I do think we're getting sort of caught.
So I think Nikki's just wanting us to, she thinks that we're not quite aligning with the Act because we haven't got when we have to make the significant decision associated with the significant decision, and the significant decisions at the wrong level. So, yeah. So in terms of the compliance with the Act element, the auditors have said the way we've done it is okay. But without massively changing the process, if you think about significant decisions normally, like the decision about whether, what the construction waste solution is, that is a significant decision under the LGA normally. So what other people do is they just say the significant decision is that project. and you'll make it at this point in your LTP. That's not actually, I mean, we can do that, but that's not massively helpful because it's pretty obvious by looking at this when you have to make that decision because it's set out in a time frame which is probably why the auditor said it was okay, but we can make that more explicit. And we can just call the significant decisions our focus areas or our themes, or
Yeah,
I think
if that
maybe-
would satisfy.
I think we're hearing where you're coming from on this, and this is definitely a complicated point.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we take that away, we'll give it a little bit more thought and just see if we've got a proposed solution that we can bring back into the next session to sort of show how we're going to round out that component as well.
yeah.
But we take the feedback.
It's just about when we're, there are big key blobs of, chunky bits of capital stuff or things that will shift our direction. And I think we need to set a runway for future councils and the community about when we can expect those are coming. And you will see them in the investment program. You do it, but I think we need to be.
You'll see them with at more granular level of detail than that. You'll see issues, strategic aspirations, therefore we need to do these things. This is the approach we've agreed, the option that we're going to use.
Yeah.
And then you get to decide how you put that together to deliver that.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm happy that you understand kind of where I'm coming from, and that's all I need, because you'll take it wherever you need to take it. And if you need to ditch it, you can ditch it.
Okay. Right, so just back to the 10-year program then. What we would do here, I'm not sure I answered it. This is where we would present different scenarios which are in the detail of how you deliver on that option. So you might say we can move to a circular economy within the first 5 years, we'll leave it to the second 5 years. We can, this is not a good example with waste, but this is where you can pull a lever with a level of service, which you might not have specified. That wasn't what the option was about. The option here is about how quickly we move to a circular economy, but you might then say, oh, we want to increase our level of service faster, or we want to do it slower. And so we would present different scenarios for that. Now, just while we're talking about level of service, just a reminder, because you'll get another workshop on this, but a reminder from last time, level of service actually captures a wide range of things, not just things that are measured by KPIs or levels of service in the LTP. It includes compliance, and it actually also it also includes strategic intent. So you think about everything we invest in as either a renewal, or it's growth related, or it's level of service. If you're doing something because you've set a strategic aspiration to do it and you're investing in it, then that falls into the level of service category. So just a quick reminder, but that will come back in a later session. So I'm just worried about time, but we actually need to talk about the significant issues.
Is everyone else kind of
I think we're
following along? We've heard from Nikki, but just wondering if this is making sense.
Hanging in there.
Yeah.
It's complex. There's a lot of things that we have to take into account.
I think that once you become familiar with it, it becomes clearer and clearer, and easier to use and understand.
I think one of the questions is, for me, is that if these are our decisions, they're very big decisions on direction that have massive cost implications, and it's just making sure we test them appropriately with the community, because the infrastructure strategy is one of those things that gets just ignored, really. And how can you adjust individual capital projects if you've already decided on your direction?
Yeah, I think it's that being a little bit too, it is a framework. Now I completely see where you're coming from, Nikki, actually. But I'm wondering if that's an interpretation beyond the intent, perhaps.
And I think we're not locking any of this in. This is the point of putting it first. We're working through these as we do the LTP prioritisation and decision making. So you set a preferred option for how we're going to invest. You then tutu with it through the LTP. It then loops back to being our most likely scenario. So we're not locked to your preferred option at the time you say this is our preferred option. When you get to the LTP prioritisation, there's flex in that.
One of the challenges is that, this is quite high level, and obviously it filtered, and it's hard to, given the nature of the decisions we actually get to make, you know, given, and we've all often talked about it, is doesn't matter how much you change the levers on the nice to haves, you're dictated by the must haves. And that's what makes all your decisions for you. And the amount of wiggle room you've got left over at the end is really small.
Well, you have a lot of wiggle room this time because the must haves were mostly water.
Well, and that will be the telling thing.
Yeah.
You know, that will be the telling thing as to whether that changes the dial, you know, switches the dial for us to have different things. So, I mean, I think I'm just getting a sense that people don't quite understand that how where the rubber hits the road, you know, how it actually impacts on the decisions we make in the LTP and things moving forward, and what those decisions are likely to be. Because as I said, that traditionally, and I accept that might change, there hasn't been a lot of wiggle room to make decisions. And we've been dictated by compliance.
Maybe it should have been one of the biggest.
Just hang on, Nikki. Just with respect, we really need to hear from other people around the table. Okay. Yeah, you know, I think we just need to understand that a little bit more, how that's going to impact those decisions. I mean, I'm trying to pull out individual bits and go, well, how does that inform, you know, a decision we're going to make? And as I used one example before about compliance, but you know, looking at those levels of service, for instance, is, you know, you've also got things like how many tennis courts, how many playgrounds, you know, all that sort of stuff in there. And those are really important as well. We need to be mindful of those. And actually, but the other one that we've talked about a lot is you know, is growth paying for growth, and you know, ensuring we're prioritising the infrastructure to where we're going to get the best returns, and you know, those sort of things we need to, you know, those things we've talked about so much, we need to see coming out in real life. You know?
So that's what you are going to see this time. So this framework isn't trying to tell you all those things now. It's just trying to set out that that's what this is going to tell you. So this will then come together with the activity plans, and you'll get to see how this all flows through into investment in each activity area. And the idea is that you're being presented with the bigger picture, the smaller picture, the smaller picture, the smaller picture, for you to then know whether your investment program is hitting all the things you need, rather than starting with the list of capital projects, which is what we normally do, and then having to discuss each item and how it fits into the bigger picture. So this is a process of stepping you through all of those things, through from the strategic direction through to individual levels of service and individual areas. So what you just talked about will be talked about for every area.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, like I said, tennis courts and courts and things like that. I mean, we've got to be able to say, well, how's that being assessed against our program? Because that's, you know,
you'll see that.
Are we above the line or below the line in achieving those things? Or are there projects that actually don't align with our level of service at all? You know, which I fear there are. So.
And just closing out that, because we've got the framework, we've got the levers, we've got the assumptions, the forecast, and we'll end up with some investment priorities. We'll be looking at it like activity class by activity class. So at what point do we say that if we look at this activity class, that's a priority, and we've got all the priorities, but we can't do all of the priorities? So how do we then sort of trade off activity classes against activity classes?
Well, that'll be the difficult part for you to have to work through.
Okay,
You'll then have to go, where are we going to reduce our level of service so that we can fit within the financial envelope that you've set?
But once we've got the priorities on the types, we should be able to understand fully the path and the reasoning that's led to them being.
And that's what we're trying to walk you through here, And they'll each be linked to, so for example here, you'll see that each of the projects, when you get to this level, we will show what our level of obligation is in terms of legislative obligation, contracts, strategy, blah, blah, service performance. So, and explicitly what level of service it's related to, and whether it is increasing a current level of service, whether it's related to maintaining a level of service. So all of that will be part of the information you get this time.
And as governance, if there's see something that really doesn't feel right, that seems illogical, then that gives the opportunity to question, were those assumptions correct? Was that strategy, you know, have we got that link back? So, Okay.
Yeah, so if you can't invest in everything in a, to deliver on a strategy, that might loop you back around to say we need to revisit that strategy and reset the expectations with our community that we're going to be able to deliver that.
So can I
Not
just,
through here.
I just want to look back to 2 points in this concept. I think it's a really great conversation to have because this is the stuff that has to be unpacked a little bit. There is some complexity here, which is why we're bringing it earlier in the process than we've ever done before, and sort of opening the Pandora's box for everyone to see. But for those of you for whom this is completely new, this is designed to try and give you some processing time. So after this session, to mull it over some more, come back with more questions, we will be able to revisit. So I think just acknowledging that everyone here is on slightly different trajectories in terms of their existing understanding. Just trying to make that clear for everyone. The other point was around consultation, which Nikki raised around the visibility of this. Challenges we've had in previous years when the must-haves have completely dominated the list is sort of going to the community with any form of choice has been a real challenge. So as we go into this new period as well, that raises questions for what we're consulting and how we're consulting, what questions are. And actually as we work through this LTP process, normally the 30-year infrastructure strategy is just released for consultation alongside the LTP draft. That's a huge landing of information all at the same time. So that is something for this group to surface. If you say actually we want more of a spotlight on the 30-year infrastructure strategy, how do we schedule and time that to provide that? That's a perfectly valid point to make, and we're early enough in the schedule to be able to take that kind of feedback.
I wonder if we need a second round of consultation on this before we agree it, because then everything flows from this in terms of our capital program. It will be spat out of.
I think
So we don't finalise the infrastructure strategy until after we finalise the LTP, because the most likely scenario is informed by the investment decisions you make in the LTP. They're very intrinsically linked, which is why they are together in terms of the LGA.
they're not a linear.
It's not a linear process. You don't agree the infrastructure strategy and then do your LGP. They should be an integrated process.
So you will tweak it. So then the interesting thing is, at what point do you know where you've leaped from option 4 to option 3 through the changes we make? Do you see what I mean? Like
that'll be feedback through when we're discussing it with you.
I know, but so we'll go out with our capital program, we'll get some feedback on it. Some things might shift. A council building might come out, or something you might invest in something different. How do you know as staff when to go back and go, oh, actually, we've now, because we've done this and this through the feedback and the finalisation of the capital program, how do you know when you've changed from an option 4 to an option 3 or what's the trigger, what's the triggers in here for shifting? So therefore, how meaningful are these options? Where are their barriers? Where do they?
So the options would help us determine the investment direction. If consultation makes a huge change from what you had agreed, then that'll be obvious in terms of the changes we make through the LTP. We look at those, we look at the options, and we say, does that take us from we're no longer moving towards a circular economy because you've taken out. You've decided to take out all the investment related to a new MRF and investing in business cases for construction waste and whatever else. Therefore, we are now actually just back at option 1, which is our most likely scenario. That's all we can afford to do. So it's just a loop that we do as we move through the process.
And under each of those, if you look at there's the impact and significant issues, the impact of strategic intent, the impact of risk appetite. Those are the triggers. If something changes in one of those, it takes down into that next tier of assessment. So that would be that would probably be the categories against which we'd be able to gauge any change.
Keeping in mind that this is a maturity step, as mentioned before. Previously, we didn't do this first.
Yeah.
We focused on the LTP investment and then we filled out the other options around it. So we're trying to give you more decision making in that process.
If it's okay, I might try to keep us on time. But I was going to have one intervention, and you can just tell me if this is unhelpful or helpful. But in terms of the flow of the workshops of these steering groups, so obviously we need to let Penny get onto her significant issues. But just in terms of logic of the flow, so we're going to go on to a conversation next about the financial strategy, which to kind of reflect on all the conversation we've had is kind of hey, how much money might we be willing to spend, right, just to set a financial appetite right from the get-go, which is obviously really important because that sort of starts to frame up everybody's thinking. And then if we think about the way we go through this flow, we come back to you in more detail around some of those revenue levers next month. But then really importantly in May, Penny will come back with that first raw output of the infrastructure strategy, which think of it at that activity level. So we're going to use that waste management, for example. You're going to say, hey, here's waste, and this is what those significant issues said, and this is what the waste minimisation plan said, for example. But actually, as you know, from a governance perspective, what do you actually want to do about this? Here are the options we're presenting you, but what do you actually want to do? And you'll give us that direction, and we'll take that away. And then we'll do some education on all of these activity areas through May and June to really get you up to speed. Where are we at with levels of service, that sort of stuff. And then back in July, we'll come back and we'll say, based on those directions that you gave us around that initial infrastructure strategy, this is what the CapEx program is looking like. And to your point, John, that's where you might say, hey, this just doesn't feel right. Something's in, something's out, something's not in the first 10 years. It's, you know, that's obviously really, really crucial July point of giving us the feedback. And you'll also say, well, actually, what does that now all mean in terms of rates, debt, etc.? So does that sort of help? It's sort of designed to be a logical flow. But really importantly, you know, you will have that intervention point in May. Like, what do you actually want to do about these significant issues and these achieving the outcomes?
That's a great summary.
Yeah.
And I would just those of you who've been around the table a while would know that the finance strategy has normally been the last thing that's come to the table. It's the first this time. That demonstrates the importance of the relationship between the finance strategy, the infrastructure strategy upfront. Super important for us as a council.
Well, I will let you get back to significant issues.
That was a worthwhile.
Yes, it was very helpful. Because this is about the process. Each step of this process will be walked through with you. Yeah, I think a lot of these questions will be answered.
I was going to say already, it feels quite different to last time.
Yeah.
The infrastructure strategy only came in the last few months before the LDP, and today we're in workshop number 2, and we're right into it. So
I have to go back and see what I've got in my submissions.
Last time we had the whole water in.
Right, so significant issues.
Yeah.
So the significant issues that were identified through this process last time, which was done early in the process. Sorry, sharing. Oh, I'm sharing the window. Rapid and sustained population growth.
Just before you start, are they in any particular order?
No.
Like are they in prioritisation?
No. Rapid and sustained population growth, which probably doesn't need any further explanation. Resilience to shock events, climate emergency, increased and increasing standards, and a historic infrastructure deficit. So,
I don't know if it's a historic deficit, it's a current deficit. It's a current ongoing deficit. I don't think it's historic.
No, I haven't called it historic. I said that.
When you said that, I just sort of,
yeah.
It's definitely not historic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where does the under those 5 is, the worsening congestion on our roads? Where does that fit under one of those?
Number 1. So that comes through in rapid and sustained population growth, and that's how that issue presents in relation to transport.
Right.
So that's.
I had some input to follow on to that. Basically, what I feel like is missing is a fluctuation in peak loads. Because like fluctuation of population, it's not the fact that there's a sustained growth, it's the fact that there's a ton of people in one place at one time and then they leave. So peak loads, and that's why I was like, is it smoothing the curve? Because if you look at waste, you could have a big event, you could have freedom camping, you could have seasonal changes that are more than, and then it also, anyway.
But just on that, Freddie, I don't think at the moment what I'm seeing with the congestion in this, it's actually not to do with peaking numbers of people in town. It's just the number of people in town.
So congestion will be in the morning and in the afternoon when people are going to work and then coming home. And
No.
I know,
Yeah.
now it's at a point where it's just blending into all the time.
Yeah.
But if you looked at, because of the long-term underinvestment in that infrastructure, it starts at peaks and then it becomes new normal. I guess the point is there a strategic framework to look at peak loads as a way of smoothing the curve before they get to chaos situations?
So
I think
that is
the
exactly.
the
when you
peak
talk-
time things, it's no point having a bucket that only, only copes the amount of liquid it needs 80% of the time, that you need you need buckets that cope with the peak time.
Yeah.
And
That's what this is about.
and you're right that it's driven by growth, but it's also driven by not enough infrastructure, which is the infrastructure deficit. But the Cape Falls Bridge, we know, is failing at peak times, and it won't fail at off-peak times. That doesn't matter, because the peak times are the driver. The same with the pipe's not big enough. It's just not big
It's
enough.
also demand management, and they just slip through the cracks a lot. If you put peaks into our issues, then we may start to focus more on demand management, which then flows through into. So I don't think it should be dismissed and just lumped into growth. I think there are some specific issues that would be worth calling out.
Quite, and I
Agree with
hear
the
what
congestion.
Stephen's saying. I expected, so I've seen scenarios used elsewhere, and there were some quite good ones done by the COVID recovery action group. So they actually drew in a different way to articulate it here what different scenarios would be. And so in the detail, and there's a model being developed for transport.
Mhm.
So we could say if the population increases by this amount, then traffic, the congestion will be, it'll be another 20 minutes to get from Frankton to Queenstown and points elsewhere. So therefore the scenarios actually are what we're thinking we're going to be dealing with. And I'm finding it a little bit sort of logically challenging to think that the options are the scenario, and they are, but really the scenario is we're here now. There are a range of different scenarios ahead of us. What are the issues within those? And it's the consequences of growth that we need to be considering.
Yes.
So therefore, these in a maturity approach should have more detail to them and have more sort of granularity as we go ahead, because then we need to make decisions. So to affect change or reduce those consequences, we need to know what those scenarios are likely to be.
Yes, and that's exactly what comes through. And if we take transport as an example, the issue we're facing is rapid and sustained population growth and a peak population that is more than double our day-to-day population. When we get into transport as an area, we then say, what does that mean for transport? And that's where we would look at everything you're talking about. Actually, there is a whole area looking at growth. What you're going to be asked to do is to essentially pick what is the scenario that we are going to invest in. Not predicting which is the scenario that's going to happen, but which is the scenario that we're investing in, and that will flow through all of these areas. So this part of the process is just agreeing that that's an issue that in each of these areas we need to ensure we are addressing. Not how we're addressing it, that will come when we get to the next stage. This is just agreeing what are the issues that we are going to flow through to make sure that all of our proposed investment programs are dealing with.
So how does the political direction feed into these? Are they just subsets of each of these, or fast track and complete disruption of what our infrastructure strategy planning investment is, or a lack of funding for state infrastructure, education, schools, state highways? Are those changes, are they significant? From what, because there may be daylight a little bit more, obviously, with the current discussions. But are they risks or the issues? I guess but they're certainly significant.
Talking about fast track.
I guess it's
Yeah.
conflating a few things, and this is not, you're quite right, and it's not a new it's not a new bloody challenge for this council. And I was just thinking about when we first started to look at peak population and include that in our forecasting. But those other issues, many of them are central government. We're reliant on central government. And you look at gridlocking on Frankton Road. I think I remember under Mayor Geddes, he went to Wellington to talk about that issue. But we've never been able to convince then NZTA to change the way that they actually funded that future growth. So it is conflating a few things there for us, and that's our challenge.
But is that not one of our issues?
It's interesting that, I think just in the last 2 days, I've at the corner of my street at the bottom, I've gone, these are the worst 2 waits I've had this corner ever in the last 2 days. So, anyway, I just want to talk about the priorities, because one thing that jumps out at me here is that the visitor economy or the visitor component is not expressed there at all. Yeah. And that's actually a really dramatic omission for me, because our infrastructure deficit is largely driven by, the case we're making is about visitor levies and things like that. And if it's not reflected in our strategy and the high level significant issues, it diminishes our argument. So we need it to be front and centre. It has always been front and centre, and it is particularly front and centre moving forward. It runs into all those issues around peak demand and around, the events and things and, public holidays and New Year's event, all those things that we've just been talking about. It also runs into, resilience, what happens to all our visitors in a AFA, what happens, it runs into climate. So anyway, that was the thing that jumped out at me, that we really need to make sure, whether it's its own significant issue or it's reflected in one of these other ones, it needs to be in there.
So it is covered under the rapid and sustained population growth. So we can either make it much more explicit, or we can have it as a separate issue, because they're very tightly.
I get that, and you can slot it into any one of those. My point is that it needs to be.
It's always been.
It needs to be.
I think like semantics, but Colin's point is very well taken, and that is this incredibly expanding and contracting population growth we have. Right now, it's just 50,000 per year, but we're going to quadruple in less than 30 years.
Yes.
We'll be at 250,000 people.
Yes.
So if the same trend continues, all of our services are going to have to expand on a yearly basis to accommodate 250,000 visitors.
Yes.
So again, I don't like fiddling around with words just for the sake of semantics, but rather sustained population growth, somewhere in there needs to be highly variable as well.
Well, the population growth itself isn't highly variable. It is increasing consistently. It's what Cody's point was that when the visitors, it can fluctuate from 56,000 to 120,000.
But that just assumes a nice smooth growth pattern. But the smooth growth pattern is radical and extreme.
Yeah.
But that's why I wonder if we actually had a sixth issue there, which is the impact of visitors.
Yes.
I agree, because when you go down.
Because population talks about, people who live here.
Yeah.
I don't read population as
separate
I see it as the impact of visitors in the future is a significant issue for us to focus on.
We always have a very express section in the LTP, which is exploring the visitor
growth.
But I
think if we put it to here, then it gives a clear direction to the public that we as a council are taking it very seriously and bringing it out of the subset into a high level.
I'll reflect that in the guidance notes that come back up both peak load and.
We can separate this into 2 issues.
Yeah.
No problem. It doesn't impact.
And I guess if I can go back to my.
They do have different but related impacts. So we'll just make that clear.
If I could just make one clarity about my first point. My first point was around the peaks and just the general impact, because I don't want us just to be planning for peaks. I see us needing to be planning for the congestion that's happening now and the peaks. So not limiting ourselves to just the peaks as well.
I thought it was interesting when we had a workshop some weeks ago around housing, and the community housing trust, and that when, so there's peaks and troughs in government policy, right? So the fast tracks are a peak of that at the moment, and a trough that the housing trust saw when there was a change in government policy. They took the opportunity to get a whole lot of resource that has meant that the consequences of growth have been mitigated a little bit because they could see that. So there are other different ebbs and flows within this too that we need to take strategically. We need to take strategic action against or to make the most of when they arise.
Okay, so we all agree that rapid and sustained population growth continues to be an issue. The actual narrative that's in here will update to reflect the current situation with fast tracks and things like that. We're going to make sure it's clear that the visitor impacts are called out. John, you raised an issue about the government investment. So I think that these are the significant issues that impact on our infrastructure. So that's a really important consideration when we look at the growth scenarios that we're going to look at, because us investing in infrastructure needs to happen alongside government investment in infrastructure. So we'll bring it into the thinking at that point.
The question is, how can we commit to an investment strategy if half of what's needed to make that successful, there's no guarantee?
Yes.
So that's probably,
Yeah. So I think we bring it in at that growth when we look at the growth scenarios.
But should that not be one of the, I'm just thinking when we make a decision to choose something, we need to then look at it. Does it respond to these issues? Does it, so then you would go, do we build a cycle trail now? Does it respond to the issue of needing, I'm just trying to work, how does your thing work and how do we make it work to best effect? Anyway. And also just the way these are phrased. I mean, an issue isn't rapid and sustained population growth. For someone else, it would be a positive if it's an even negative issue. These are things that could, or at least
costs and consequences.
Is it the adverse effects of, like how can we frame them?
I think the issues and significance decision is laid out. That's the terminology we need to use. Is that right? Do we have discretion over calling things issues?
Oh no, they're called issues. I think Nikki's point is they're not stated as issues.
I guess drivers would be, one of the things that are driving our reaction to our investment program and our long-term plan and our.
They are our investment drivers.
So that's.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
So, an issue is a pejorative,
Yeah,
negative sort of framing in a way, whereas a driver is more contextual framing.
Is that our language issues?
Sorry?
Is that our language issues? Or will we
No. It's the act.
It's the act.
But we've framed them more as investment drivers, the way we've worded them.
Okay.
But we've described them clearly as issues.
So should climate emergency be the thing, or should emissions reduction, or because that's how Auckland does it? They do emissions reduction rather than climate emergency. Because what's the driver?
To the adaptation though.
Yeah, but do we then need to put something emissions reduction and biodiversity?
Well, I guess there'll be a lot of things that fall out under each of these.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a valid point to raise.
But it's just about does this intervention deliver emissions reduction, or does it deliver what in relation to the climate emergency? It's just perhaps a little bit vague.
We've linked it to the climate emergency because that was the issue that council had raised. And we've got the narrative here describes it, bringing it to, focusing it on both carbon emissions and adaptation and biodiversity.
Yeah.
So the words climate emergency is just the title, which is trying to encompass all three. And we were linking it to the issue that we raised as a council, which was that we have a climate emergency.
Yeah, and that then appeals to the auditors because they directly want to see how we're responding to our announcement of emergency.
Yeah.
I mean, but that is, it's a valid question, and in the same way as we're bringing, separating out the volatility of the peaks and troughs of the population growth, or separating out the visitation. This is a starting point for the conversation. So it's for this council to determine where you want to place your emphasis and the tone you want to take with these. Very much open.
And how many you want to have.
Yeah. So yes, this particular action address our climate emergency, and it can do that because it might be an adaptation thing, it might be an emissions thing, or it might be biodiversity.
Sorry, I need to read the next one.
So when I've said for these ones suggest no change, I don't mean no change in the narrative, just in the broad acceptance that these are still the significant issues that we're working towards. The fourth one is increased and increasing standards. So this was a massive driver in our previous LTP and infrastructure strategy, which is where compliance requirements have been going up significantly. And this is what led to the majority of our previous LTP being in the must-do category. Actually, we think this one has changed a bit. What we're seeing is a fluctuation in standards and uncertainty around future standards. They could be higher or they could be lower. And so this, we think, is worth updating to have a focus on uncertainty of future standards rather than being specifically on increased standards.
Yeah, because at the moment, to some extent, there's removal or reduction of standards that are enabling for rapid growth or development. Yeah, so there's the variability is an issue in itself, let alone the
So the response might be flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And hopefully we can just do the last one quickly. Infrastructure deficit. It's still an issue.
At least someone fixed it last night.
So I think the facilitators, Ian's keen to take a break.
I wasn't necessarily keen on a break, I was just
Keen on moving along.
preserve the
Yeah.
time frames if possible.
So just
Sorry.
one question, where does fast track sit? Because of government changing standards is a thing, so is fast track.
Well, that's part of rapid and sustained population
Is
growth.
that because it's more about uncertainty and lack of control?
I think you can always
Around-
with regulatory changes as a let's get their own right.
Well, that's
and
what
then maybe-
increasing standards. That's what uncertain standards is. It's changing regulatory
Could
environment.
Could we capture fast track within that, or is it too different?
Well, the issue with
We
fast
can't
track,
deal with-
the issue is rapid growth that it causes. So it links back to the same
It's a
issue.
lack of control of where. It is unplanned growth. It is growth that doesn't fit with our strategic model, so it throws everything out. How do we capture that?
It can come in under just, I already added.
I was going
I'd
to
already
just might be able to
flagged
change the
to add
name
that
of
under
that
the
increasing
first one.
standards one to something like,
Drivers of
regulatory-
uncertainty.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's
regulatory regime.
kind of like the antithesis of the education issue, right? Where the day the school opens, it's full. And so the underinvestment there from central government and the inability to actually grapple with our growth.
Well, that's that sits in infrastructure deficit probably, but I think there's that we've been dealing with regulatory, legislative and regulatory uncertainty for so many years, it's actually paralysing us really. So
I don't think any of these issues are going to get lost.
No.
It's,
I've made it
No,
up.
it's just about the experience, I suppose, in the high level. Yeah, because it's just about,
And there's a high degree of connectivity between a lot of them and overlap,
I question. Yeah.
integrated.
So
I
if
suppose
there's anything, I think
you
it's
go
just-
back to, the regional deal, for instance, is that the 5 priority areas, are they really clearly reflected in any of these? And I can't do it exactly on the fly, but it's a useful test to say, are these really clearly reflected in our biggest issues? Because they should be.
well, they're mostly related to rapid and sustained population growth. But they're also mostly outside of things that we directly invest in from an infrastructure
But
perspective.
once again, that's why we needed to include visitors in there, because that's a really important one, and as well as the infrastructure deficits captured, so that's great, but,
Is the the drive for different ways of funding things? Is that
That will be a good segue into the financial strategy.
but
discussion.
if we're just flagging it up, is that almost that directive that we look to other forms of funding?
I mean, just thinking
And that expectation politically, is that something that sort of we
we speak to at that high level.
I would
Yeah,
say you do
yeah,
want to
yeah.
do that, but I think we do that in the finance strategy. So
Well,
that'll come out in the next.
I'm thinking out loud, I think the fourth one down needs to be regulatory and financial uncertainty and funding uncertainty. Or something like that, because I think it needs to be far more explicit in
Yeah.
what the issue is.
Yeah.
And anyway, let's just throw that out there.
And
So infrastructure deficit covers the causes of the infrastructure deficit, which are in part continued escalating costs and in part limited funding availability. Now
But it
that'll
doesn't-
be
that
different
doesn't
this
cover
year.
Regulatory changes and things like that. And
No, so that's increased and increasing standards.
But it's.
They're all captured in here.
they might be captured, but
I know,
I
but
think
it
they need
wants
to be
to be-
explicit. Some of them
front
are,
and centre, they
No,
need-
yeah, feedback, but
yeah.
tonally, when these are worded up, we need to make sure there's emphasis
I
on
don't
that.
want them to be, have to be slid in underneath. I want the biggest issues to
needs
be
to be
front and centre. And I think that's really important, but anyway.
So if there was a framing statement in the long-term plan, which said this is the key issue, there's a paragraph on each one of those, I would imagine all of those subsets would be linked around one of those topics, and I guess that's, that's, because it is the framing and the context for everything that follows.
We are seeing this outside of that context, even in the latest 30-year infrastructure strategy, which was a bit of a wrestle to get pulled into shape. We do go into that, but it's really good at this stage to actually hear what the key issues are so that we can make sure that they're really installed.
That financial one, actually, we could talk about it after your session because you might find it comes up through there. But actually, I think that's a really good point because we have a different issue this time than we had last time. Last time was availability of financing.
Yeah.
So we were up against our debt cap. You will not be anywhere near your debt cap this time. And so actually what you're talking about is affordability to the community, which is actually a different issue.
So maybe I'll just reflect back. The key thing we've heard.
can I just interject just one? We've been talking a lot about water quality lately and separate it from discharge and so on, but we're looking at forming new strategic partnerships and kind of changing things up a bit. I don't believe water quality, again, should just slip in under climate emergency.
So it's
They're different things. I just wonder
it
as
will be the CCO now. It's not going to be.
no, it will be because roads, anything.
I don't think that the water quality
Or just,
is an issue that impacts on what we invest in.
is it a long-term pressure?
It might be it's one of the things
Should
we
it be
need
a
to,
key driver? Should it be an issue? Should it be? And are we, because we're feeding into the CCO through the strategic intent, and there are elements of the Three Waters stuff that will come in here where it supports integrated infrastructure planning. Should water, I mean, we've got climate emergency in there. Why would water, when our whole economy is kind of revolves around it one way or another?
So
It
but
is,
there's
it
not
is,
an- is there an issue
I'm
with
just,
water quality now that impacts on,
should it be an issue before it becomes a significant issue? I don't,
well, that's not what significant issues are. And
that's what.
they are the pressures that,
Protect-
We see it coming.
So is, well, yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because
do we have a strategy around water
at
quality?
well, we should have, that's the point, is we don't do a lot around water quality.
It's not a statutory mandate.
No.
Can I press-
No, it is.
It's a regional council.
No, they regulate, but we deliver. So everything we deliver around bylaws, around district planning, it's around infrastructure. It is a massive role. It just delivers on their direction. So it's always been missed. And climate was the same for a long time. And yet water is so important to everything we do in this district. If we let it go, it will be gone.
I need to press pause on this because I think we've got an hour and 20 minutes to get through a whole bunch of information. I appreciate where you're coming from this. I don't think it's
Right,
right.
it's not for you to press pause on, Cody. It's not. I
If
mean,
I'm
the
not-
chair can, but I just want to raise it that sometimes we miss things and they become issues too late. Is our water healthy? No, it's not. We know that. We've got why doing summits explaining the issues with water across the district. So I think it is an issue, and I think we should just
John.
pause on it. We can come back to it.
Yeah, so what I will say is hold that thought and
Yeah,
when
we
we work
can do
through
that.
different investment areas.
Yeah.
Then think about where some of that might will be integrated.
Thank you.
Catherine? Or we're gonna,
We should have a break.
5 minutes, 5 minutes.
1 minute?
Yeah.
So before we start, I just say we need to really be able to respect each other's space and giving each other a voice at the table. And if we don't hear from everybody, we're not doing our job. So I don't know, try and signal to John that you want to speak by putting up your hand. Don't butt in. Don't disrespect each other. Let's try to give each other space.
That doesn't apply to anyone at that end of the table, just saying. So, well done on covering the biscuit break.
All right, so keeping in mind that we had a conversation earlier about whether these are the significant decisions or whether the options or the actual investment blobs are the significant decisions, which we're going to come back to. What we wanted to lock in for the next phase is that these are the areas in which you have strategic decisions to make in terms of the extent to which you invest in them and the way in which you invest in the strategic intent and manage the issues in each of these areas. So the first area is responding to natural hazard risks and the effects of climate change. So we don't propose that we change, we suggest we continue to include this as a significant decision, key area where we need to make decisions. But in this year, this infrastructure strategy, we want to be clearer on the available options so that we can set clear investment intentions. So we want to use the climate scenarios. We want to look at the ORC's natural hazard risk assessment. So bring in that the body of work that exists around this into that, and for that to form the strategic intent. And so that you are seeing a kind of better starting point, or you're seeing a starting point. We didn't see this last time. Essentially, here are all the potential investments that you could make in responding to natural hazard risks and the effect of climate change. And then what you're essentially doing when you look at the options and then at the LTP is the extent to which you invest in those and which areas you focus on. So this time we didn't have that framing when you went into the LTP last time. This time we filled it in after. We want to do it before.
Cool. I think the language has to change. The intent is clear and you articulated it well, but it's not response. It's reducing it's building resilience to natural hazard risk and the effects of climate change. Response has a particular meaning under the emergency management bill, which is not this.
Yes, good point.
Otherwise, good.
Clarification. Response is after,
Yeah.
and what you're saying is before it happens.
Yeah, beforehand, so the traditional term is readiness or reduction. Reduction is clear, another one, but it's actually building resilience too.
Yeah.
So when we look to invest in the infrastructure strategy in particular, we should be looking for opportunities to understanding the hazards, opportunities to make them more resilient, more flexible, maybe distributed, a whole range of stuff, but it's not responding. Responding is after the fact. We need to do that too. We need to do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, take that one there. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one? Will we go to the next one? Excellent. Next one is reducing infrastructure's impact on the environment. Again, we don't suggest that we change that as a focus area, significant decision. But what we want to do more clearly this time, clearly this time, is show what are the potential investments over 30 years that could be made in strategic interventions to progress the CDP outcomes over that time period. So again, linking back to the commentary before about we have a plan, this is what it would take to give life to that in the next 10 years and beyond. Then you make decisions in terms of the options and the LTP investment program, how far you go with what areas of focus you zero in on. Keeping in mind this is our investment, not other people's investment.
Sure, I think just reading the content of that, the last LTP, that and the strategy, that the conversation we're going to have on Thursday about wastewater infrastructure sit there very well, even though in future we're not going to have direct control of that. But the imperatives in there and the values included in it should inform our conversation. So that's good.
Providing for the transport networks.
Can I just say one thing? Reducing infrastructure and impact on the environment. There's also using infrastructure to reduce impact on the environment. So I just wonder if there's just a subtlety in there that's missed.
I think this includes both of those.
Okay. It does.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This includes the, yeah, yes, it does include both. Providing for the transport networks capacity, functionality and transformation. This is really just the focus on transport. Again, we're not suggesting that this change as a focus area or a significant decision, but this time the different options for delivering on strategic transport outcomes will be discussed up front before looking at our investment program, and they will be tied into the NZTA strategic network plan process and the integrated transport network plan that we are developing together with QLDC and ORC that comes off the back of that, which we're hoping to have the first draft of and done in time for this. This will essentially reflect what's in that transport network plan. Okay. Types of waste management services and facilities provided. This is one I've been using as the example. I've suggested a change that's probably already accounted for there. So I think the key thing here is making sure this is focused on waste minimisation and management. We had it focused on the services and facilities. I think it's just a wording thing here. The description of this is the type of services and facilities we provide, and I think that the significant decision should be focused on the extent to which or speed with which we move towards zero waste and a circular economy, so that it aligns with our vision for waste.
Because out of all of these, that's the least sort of ambitious. It's just a statement.
Yes, exactly.
So
yes. Servicing of priority development areas. So this one last time reflected the impact of investment in our priority development areas in the spatial plan. What we're suggesting this time is that this is expanded to focus on providing for growth more broadly, so both at a network level and in the priority development areas, and that will enable us to bring in the network impacts for transport and also the impacts of fast track in terms of our considerations. But look, we're not going to plan for fast tracks, obviously, but we can think about it here rather than just having it narrowly focused in priority development areas. And this is where the options that you were given will represent different scenarios of the pattern of growth we're investing in.
So, and look, I get that, but one of the issues that I've expressed over the last few years is we now have more zoned area, more priority development areas than we can possibly ever afford to service, regardless of the sequence they come at us, quite frankly. So how do we prioritise which areas, and we've doubled down on the intensification and things like that as well, which have a further impact on servicing cost. How do we prioritise those things? How do we make a decision which prioritises which areas we develop, and we simply just have too much now?
So that's what you'll be asked to do, and you'll be presented with a range of ways to make that decision. So that's something that P&D and the strategic growth team and the infrastructure strategy team and P&I will be working on. All we're identifying here is that we want to do that. So that we're getting your agreement that that's what we want to do.
But what relevance does it being a priority development area under the spatial plan give it priority over servicing existing greenfields or zoned areas?
That's what you'll work through. What I'm suggesting, the change to this is that we focus on growth more broadly. This is a growth significant decision, So what the decision you'll be asked to make is what is that pattern of growth that we are investing in? And that will include potentially options like, I'm not saying they are, just illustrative purposes only. We are prioritising greenfield over brown intensification in already existing areas. Therefore, these priority development areas in this order. But I'm not saying that is one of the options. Those are the kinds of discussions we have to have.
Do we have a means to sort of prioritise development that does align with our spatial plan over those that don't, like as in the fast tracks and stuff like that? Can be that signalled in our?
That is part of what you'll be talking about when we actually work through the options for this with you.
Nicola, did you want to?
Yeah, I agree with you there, Quentin, and so I wonder if the wording is like allowing us to kind of, because in my mind it's going, we want a service or growth, and I know you're saying that then we will make the decisions after, but some like the manage of growth, something a bit more that we're not just like allowing for growth and then we make the decisions where. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what this decision is. It's the way in which you are going to invest in growth infrastructure.
That just
And
seems very
therefore,
enabling. That's my only, like
well, the options will go from enabling of all growth to,
yeah.
well, within the bounds of what we can do, which under the NPSUD and the Planning Act, which is that we have to enable growth.
Yeah.
So it'll be different ways to do what we are required to do within, because we're going to have constraints on what we can invest in. Although keeping in mind that the most expensive infrastructure investments in relation to growth are on our state highways and water.
Yeah.
So this is really, really important to set direction for this SCO.
That's the point I was going to make, not only for CCO, but if we make very clear statements in all of our strategic documents and operative documents that when someone is coming up with a brainwave for the next fast track, because the panels take account of that.
Yeah.
What do the documents in the district say about this? It doesn't align with that. No, it rules it out entirely. Well, we'll take that seriously. So this is the first opportunity, first cab off the rank to get that happening.
Yeah. And it has to build on our district plan and on the spatial plan in terms of what they say. This will just be different ways of achieving that.
Your opportunity to amplify, and this is marked, and when we're talking about regional spatial planning further down the track, this will be an input into that. So all of these things do layer on top of each other.
I think for me it's just the wording, like, you know, if you change it from suggest that this is expanded to focus on the extent to which we provide for growth. Those I think subtle wording changes kind of, they make a difference in the expectations of the people who are reading the documents, and they may only read part of them, not the rest of them. So
we're going to have the chance to take that.
Yeah, you'll see it when we come back.
I'm just thinking when we talk about this,
and this is a difficult one, and it'll be a difficult one for you to work through, because in terms of extent to which we provide for growth, we are required to provide for growth in a certain way. This is about the way in which you do that.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not the extent to which necessarily, because we have, and that'll be presented when we come back with this, in terms of what those constraints or drivers are that we have to work with.
So it's our policy and strategy for delivering the growth, well, or investing in the growth that we're required to have. And we've already got that plan enabled growth in place. So we've got our next 30 years already done.
As well, and rate and scale that's manageable within, so there's lots of room to.
and we may not be providing it, maybe, but the developer is providing through development agreements, so it's not.
And that might be something, that's something you introduce in here, in the finance strategy. But, just do one more and then I'm done. And then the last two, we're suggesting we bring them together because I think we worked through this, when Simon and I worked through this, when we did this last time, we kind of had them together, then we separated them, but one of them is about, so well-designed neighbourhoods with social infrastructure that provides the everyday needs, is essentially about the level of service that you receive in a particular neighbourhood in relation to community facilities, driven by a framework that is in the in the infrastructure strategy, but comes from a mixture of the Parks and Reserves Provision Plan and the Community Facilities Strategy. And it's related to how easily you can access the various types of facilities in your neighbourhood. And the spectrum here was about do we meet this standard everywhere, so retrofit everywhere, or do we only aim to meet it in priority growth areas? So there was a spectrum there. The other one, the extent of investment in strategically placed integrated facilities, is about, and this is from the Community Facilities Strategy where this was agreed, that we would have certain strategic assets from a community facilities perspective where we centralised certain functionality for the whole ward, basically. And there was decision, and that set what those integrated facilities would look like, what catchment they would service, and then essentially what happens in various neighbourhoods and particularly in priority development areas is somewhat related to what we have centralised. So this is why Simon and I kind of landed on this time, because we have investment in the strategically placed integrated facilities, and we'll be talking about investment in all of the growth areas. Actually, it makes sense to look at them together because the decision you make on one affects the other. So that's the change we're just suggesting here is we roll these together and consider them as one.
I suppose that we've got to be careful there because there's sort of competing, we've got the same with wastewater and whatever. Are we better off centralising or decentralising?
And that's the decision you're going to need to make.
And so look, that's the level of service question as well. We need to understand what things we're trying to decentralise and ones we want and for what reason. So I just want to, just cautious about just that, centralising things too much.
So that is the decision here, is to what extent do you centralise and what in strategically placed integrated facilities versus what do you develop further in neighbourhoods there, and predominantly being growth areas because that's where we have the opportunity to build new. And so the spectrum of options you have here will have a range of scenarios.
And just the addition to that, the perception that providing a facility in Queenstown for the district services the Upper Clutha, I think is almost dead in the water. We need to, we need to make sure that we're providing a similar level of service across the district.
Sure, that's what the straw's at.
Yeah, particularly as population grows, but also unlike wastewater, I think you use the example, that generally, unless you live in parts of Wellington, travels only one way. So this then links into the transport component. So if we're going to centralise it, we need to make sure that people's not just access, it's being able to get there and home again or wherever.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if some of this might be more amenable in the maturing approach you're taking, that some of it could be matrixed. So, so they've got dependencies on one another that they're not easily captured just on a list.
They definitely have dependencies. So if you look back at the last infrastructure strategy, you will see some of the blobs are repeated because they actually contribute to multiple areas. Yeah. So definitely there are. The growth one complicates things because we want to have a specific growth focus so we understand the decisions you're making, but then in all of these other areas, there are obviously growth components. So that's just a bit of complexity we will navigate when we get to it.
Sweet. And we have within our KPIs for, so do we revisit that as part of?
That's part of what's happening. So you'll see level of service come to you, and part of that is trying to work out which elements of that come into the KPIs. So particularly in the community facilities space, there are a range of service provision levels that are set out in strategies and in the Parks and Reserves Provision Plan that don't flow through into the KPIs in the LTP. But they are the levels of service that these guys work to when they're doing their planning.
So there will be like a high level equivalent to the health services delivery plan that we're waiting to see applied in, and then we see what our gaps and what our future opportunities are.
Yeah, so actually in this case, that is what you'll see this time, is we will, instead of just having projects on the CapEx list and then Simon bringing forward a summary that says this is important because it relates to this provision level that we set, we'll show you the provision levels and say if we wanted to meet all of these provision levels, here are all of the 30-year investments we'll need to do. So Simon's going to have a ball because you don't normally see all the things he wants.
I've just got one more, and just for context, I'm looking at Auckland's summary document of its infrastructure strategy, and I really like it. It does include as big issues emissions reduction and degradation of the environment, both of them and big issues. But I want to get down to the decisions. They include adaptation to climate change. They include specifically greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Even actually reducing vehicle kilometres travelled, but they have one down there that's Te Mauri o Te Wai, and that's how Auckland Council will deliver Te Mauri o Te Wai, the life sustaining capacity of water, Te Mana o Te Wai, vital importance of water. Those are in their list of big decisions.
So that would be under the current, the previous legislative environment. Their infrastructure strategy was done, and Te Mana o Te Wai is part of the one of the things that's actually been removed from the that was part of the specific legislative environment under the previous
Can I just please without the pushback? I'm just putting something out there. Now the well-beings are out, but we've decided to keep them. I'm saying water is important, but Te Mana o Te Wai and Te Mauri o Te Wai is not even a concept that is within the legislative documents, right? Te Mana o Te Wai is, but that doesn't. It is a phrasing. It doesn't mean that it's the concept in the legislation. You can still protect Te Mauri o Te Wai outside of the legislative requirements. So what I'm saying, it doesn't need to be phrased in the same way. But what I'm saying is that they have focused clearly on protecting water.
I think that at the risk, I'm going to interrupt, because what I'm sensing from the Auckland plan, and when it comes back to the discussion we had earlier, they've got a lot more detailed outcomes at a higher level, and we haven't even got to what those detailed outcomes might fall out. Because I still see we're talking about framing here, context, and we haven't got down to what this looks like or what that looks like. We haven't got there yet.
I disagree on this, because I think this is high level. It is simply how will Auckland Council deliver on protection of water, just like how we deliver on servicing of priority development areas, how will we deliver on waste management services and facilities provided. How is this at a greater level of specificity than any of those?
So I would just say this is about how we invest in our infrastructure to deliver that. And so the reason that would have been in Auckland's plan was because of
the unitary.
So they have the regional council responsibilities as
yes,
well.
they do, but also we have to deliver on regional council direction. So there's no reason, I guess what I'm saying is there's no reason why it can't be. And why don't we just think a little bit differently? It's not all about congestion. It's not all about getting around faster. Sometimes we need to put at the heart of our infrastructure strategy protection of the environment really, really clearly. And sometimes that might need to be more specific than just climate emergency. I'm just suggesting, as they've done, that water can be a standalone thing that we focus on, and that might then deliver different decisions and outcomes that might deliver better, I guess, outcomes for future generations.
Well, that's what everybody wants us to do.
If I can just jump in, I don't think you're hearing pushback. I think you're hearing an explanation of why it wasn't there. I don't think obviously they're not sitting here today to try and broker yes or no, in or out. So we do hear you, and actually if that is a sentiment that is shared around the table, we'll take that away. We're reflecting the work we bring back, and that is for further conversation between councillors. Officers are not trying to gatekeep what is in or out at this stage. Really, we're not. We're so early in the process. Big wide conversations are really
I appreciate that. I hope not, because I think this is where we have to have these discussions. Otherwise things just roll on as they've always rolled on, and if we've got different ideas like peak population stuff or anything else, a different approach to anything, then we need to be able to talk about it.
Okay, so if everybody wants us to look at that, then we can, but we kind of need some direction on that now.
Doesn't this come under the reducing infrastructure's impact on the environment?
And the consequences of current population and growth. So so I reckon some of these things should be issues, and then our values should be come across them. So that I think the quality of water is key for us, for society, for communities, and mana whenua not the least. So some of these things, and they're captured in the Beyond 2050 document too. So probably need to capture more of those in here. And that's a key one that I think, you're right, it doesn't get enough emphasis. Let's come back to it later, make sure that it does.
So I guess it's how do we close up and bring the outcomes?
Yeah.
Some of our high level outcomes into our high level decision making. So, because they will all link
I
back
think
to.
it's, yeah, and it's very hard to decide on a day like this in the heat of the moment with all other stuff going on. I think we need to be able to just think things through, see where things fit and come back to it if that's okay. Maybe at the start of the next session or
I don't know
later.
what's scheduled in, that is the intent of the program. Yeah, and like that would be covered as part of protecting the infrastructure, the impact of reducing infrastructure's impact on the environment. That would be covered in there. Just unless we are given a direction that that's an additional significant decision we want to focus on, we wouldn't be bringing back a proposed investment program about how we would protect the body of water, which is what these are for. So in each of these areas, you will get, this is how the issue presents in this area. This is our strategic aspiration in this area through, government plans and our own strategies. And therefore, these are all the investments that would be needed in 30 years. Here are the options for how to deliver that, which flow through the LTP. So unless we have direction to specifically add this, then you won't get that picture. But I can assure you that consideration of water quality is part of reducing infrastructure's impact on the environment.
And yet we have the decision that we have on Thursday. So it's just understanding how this works.
But Thursday's decision is quite similar to this.
Yeah.
This
And
is a
this is more akin to the planning reform where we're dealing with the funnel. Yeah. We are dealing with the funnel.
Yeah.
And so I understand the councillors' interest in making sure that we're capturing things at this high level.
Yeah.
That then don't rule things out at the where the rubber hits the road. So, and I think that's probably
and
I'll speak to the council, but I think that probably is part of the anxiety that we're hearing. So,
But there was, if anything, then that first box there, which, I mentioned could perhaps better be building resilience to, but it's in there. It's the impact on our natural environment. It's not just natural hazards, but it's our impact on the natural environment, because that's where climate change sits. So maybe these need to be nuanced a little bit in to be able to capture that sort of, so we have an opportunity at a high level to capture them later.
well, the second one is the one that's about protecting the environment.
Yeah, but that's infrastructure. Yeah, okay.
Because just keeping in mind that the infrastructure strategy is all about infrastructure's impact and our investment in infrastructure.
Yep.
So yeah, but we can reframe one of those to include it. I just want to be clear though, that that's how we're bringing in the water quality thing, is we're going to include it there. We're not adding an additional. Okay.
At the station.
Well, I'm just.
Yep.
There's a lot of work to get to the next step in May to bring you these programs, and so I'm just trying to make sure that we've got clear
I think
expectations.
you've heard enough about the areas of interest.
Yeah.
That would be looking to identify within what comes back to us next.
Okay.
Whether they're sort of standalone or covered or referenced or sub parts of.
Dave, for now.
Give us the remote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Financial appetite.
change of pace. Okay, so the lovely financial strategy, which is 22 pages. I don't know if anyone's read it. Yellow page in the last long-term plan. Yeah, and as we've heard, it's quite a different setup this time round. We don't have water potentially, and we could have some more headroom. So what can we do differently? So what I've done here is a bit of a timeline when we're going to bring back bits of the tools in the toolbox, I guess you've got. So your revenue levers coming up in April. That's all the tools that you have around where do we get our revenue from, alternative revenue levers. What I'm looking for today is a bit of a guide on where you want us to go with the financial appetite. So where do you want rates to be pitched at? Where do you want the debt to go? It's just really high level at this point because it actually determins what we bring back to you. If you tell us that you want no rates or increases, we're going to bring you back a really lean long-term plan with some options, obviously. But yeah, so it's really important that we get that heads up today. So that's what I'm trying to achieve today. August, we've got a couple of sort of a check-in point. We know where are we at. We've heard a few things in the activity plans. We've heard some other things around the policies. So we'll just bring you back some information then. October, we'll start to bring some of those metrics. So where are we sitting at with the rates increases? Where are we sitting at with debt? So we'll start to keep a running total all the way through this process. So that you can keep an eye on that. So it's not a big shock at the end. And then obviously November 1, hopefully we'll have some draft strategies and draft policies for you to review. Okay, so what is a financial strategy? So Section 101A, Section 101A in the Local Government Act. It's not a very long section, but it does have some specific requirements. So it requires 10-year direction. It requires your proposals around how you're going to fund your expenditure. It talks about talking about significant factors that affect your cost drivers, so your growth, renewals, and your levels of service. So it's asking us to include in that strategy what those factors are. It also asks us to talk about what changes might be happening in the population, what happens in land use change, and what capital we might need to provide that. So that's why it's really important to be linked with the infrastructure strategy. And I'll talk about that next. And the other little chestnut is self-imposed limits. So we're required to put a limit for the 10 years of the financial strategy of the rate increases. And currently in our current financial strategy, for the first 2 years, we had planned to have a limit of 16% and then going out to 10% for those remaining years. So that's kind of what we need to decide eventually through this process, and also the borrowing limits. So they're self-imposed, so you can breach them. There's no consequences of breaching them, but what you're doing when you go out to consultation is you're saying we're going to try and limit our rates and our borrowing to those limits. Next slide. Yeah, so just again reiterating, we've got to align with the infrastructure strategy. So that's why they're kind of coming to the same workshops. It's a 10-year strategy. And again, like the infrastructure strategy, we can include water, but only where it supports integrated infrastructure planning. Now, assumptions, obviously a big factor in our strategies. And as you heard, we have to make some assumptions and include those in our financial strategy. And these are just the headline ones that we already kind of have an assumption around what we're going to use. So for population growth, we've always used Stats New Zealand high projections. And obviously it's not been as useful, but we've got to pinpoint and use a benchmark. And obviously the auditors are very interested in what we're using. So they're looking at these assumptions and making sure that we are abiding those. We also, for inflation, the local government sector gets some information from a company called Burrell. They produce 10-year projections in construction, salary and wages, real life kind of escalation points. And so all local government will be using those Burrells, and that will be, again, the expectation of the auditors that we would use that. And land use, again, we just use our spatial planning and district planning as our guides. So those are the key assumptions at this stage.
Question around NZ.
Yeah.
Even their highest projections are way off. So how do we manage to articulate that they're wrong and this is where we actually sit. I hadn't heard about pensions.
Give you a little bit of an update on that, just on behalf of Anita. We are currently working with Stats NZ, and they're going to do a specific set of Queenstown Lakes projections, including down to the ward and the SA2, I think. With the Benji Patterson work. And we're expecting to have that over the next couple of months, and we'll do a slight amendment to the SG schedule, and we'll bring that detail to you in May, alongside the other significant forecasting assumptions.
And is that CNZ indicated that is what they will use going forward, or is that?
That they are doing that. Yeah, they have indicated that they'll do that for us. With us.
Catherine, just in terms of the land use component there around priority, identifying future land use as part of that plan, what's the discount that you put back or take off that for people not actually getting on and doing development? Like there's X amount of land presumably that's potentially developable. What's the percentage you place on how much of that is going to be developed within that next 10 years, or is there a scaling back, or how does that kind of work?
More comfortable about connections of this. So
right.
Look at the legislation, what it requires us to do is basically state what our expected changes in population and land use in the district, and the capital and the operating costs of providing for these changes. So I guess when you're doing your infrastructure strategy and you're then prioritising which capital projects, we just need to make sure that that's reflected in the financial strategy and the numbers that was turned into the strategy.
It will come through in those growth scenarios that I was referencing before, and it's really based on things like the HBCA that have already done some work on it.
Right, because the counter to that is that there will be private plan changes and fast tracks in there that will, where the plan stuff doesn't happen, but other stuff will, so probably levels out to some extent.
Which are then funded by DCs, which would be.
I'm just thinking that the reason I raise that or think about that is because if you plan for certain development in Remarks Park, for example, and Alistair Porter doesn't actually do it, then that skews everything that you kind of aim towards. So is there a level of sort of dialing it back to take into account it might not happen, or how does it? It's kind of what I'm trying to throw out.
Yeah. It depends if there's a development agreement or some arrangement as well.
And this is the problem, obviously, with DCs, is that we've got to put some projects in, but we don't know whether the ones we need until we know whether developers or whatever are going forward, and then we do it collecting DCs for the wrong things, and we're not collecting enough for the things that, we're not even collecting them for the other projects that we do deliver, because they've been prioritised through some development agreement or something.
And not even as a
well, he's pretty good at stating the bleeding obvious, but anyway. Dare I say it? I was thinking of just reading his article just before.
But to speak to that, presumably with more debt headroom, we could put more placeholder figures for community and other infrastructure in there, which would allow us to cast our net wider for development levies, not, so that if something happens, but at least we've got something in that plan that relates to that area, but it becomes unaffordable, that's the problem. If you cover all the variabilities, the plan becomes unaffordable and undeliverable, and you can't, we just can't. This is the problem I was trying to express before, is that we simply cannot cover the zoned and anticipated development with infrastructure and social infrastructure in the plan, and I don't know how now we prioritise which ones we do. We used to have a rolling 10-year, the district plan used to basically project 10 years, and you would give or take, you would have 10 years of infrastructure to deliver. Now we've got 30 to 50 years worth of zoning and 80 years worth of infrastructure to deliver in that same time frame.
And it could happen at any time.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, so I think, just picking up on that discussion there, I think we'll go through this now. That's what the financial strategy is all about, is a gatekeeper to that infrastructure strategy. But there is a lot of assumptions and those growth projections that make up that as well. So it's quite important to know that's sort of the direction that we're getting from again. To Quinton's point before, so yeah, we can go and do everything. We've got a bit more headroom, but the financial strategy is really our gatekeeper for that affordability. And that's probably the most important thing to take up from that financial strategy. Sort of feeding into that financial strategy as well, as we've got a few other policies in there. A really key one to be aware of is the revenue and financing policy. So basically that just sort of says who's going to pay at the end of the day. So if it's the end user, the developer or the ratepayer. We also have the significant and engagement policy and the big impact to financial strategy there. It's just it triggers our consultation with major funding setting changes. And then we also have the rates remission and postponement policy. So that's just our backstop or our one, just to make sure everything's fair, and it just has when we can apply any rates relief as well. Got the development contributions policy. This policy will remain the main one for how we're going to recover the costs of growth from developers. And then we have the fees and charges schedule as well, and that's just for the everyday use. So if you're going into this, will be pool rules, building consents as well. So that was just an overview of the policies. Any questions on that?
One thing that jumps out, and I may just be nitpicky, but the infrastructure strategy is 30 years, the financing strategy is 10 years. Is that simply because our hands are tied by what we can do through the LGFA?
No, it's just, I think that's legislation for 10 years, but we are actually working to model that through the 30 years as well, as part of this new way of looking at it, and we've got the benefit of activity reporting to help with that.
So I could replace 10 years with 30 years. And 50 years.
Yes, hopefully, that's the intent, but it's a new way of doing it here as well.
Some councils have actually extended it to 100 years to ensure that they have fully accounted for the depreciation on their assets. But that's a massive job to try and get 100 years worth of OpEx. And, yeah.
You'll still be around.
Yeah, and as you can sort of see as we go through this, there is, you know, you're more defined right at the start, so you get better outcomes from that. As we go as to later years as well, it'll be more. This is what's generally looking like from a funding point of view. It's not.
And one more silly question. Are these imposed on us externally, or do we impose them on ourselves? Who imposes it on us externally?
They're all prescribed in the local government act.
Okay, but they prescribe 10 years.
Yes, for the financial strategy.
But so the 100 years is a voluntary thing.
Yeah, that was voluntary.
Yeah. Just regarding that transition between the development contributions, the development levy legislation, and I mean, I've signalled before, I mean, the single biggest gain that we can make for ratepayers was by shifting the balance here, and I'm just trying to, I still haven't got clarity about what that looks like. Okay, how do we shift the balance? How do we set up our own policies, and with the uncertainty of the development levy bill landing, but you know, we clearly need to do the work to reframe that the balance, and regardless of how it looks, yeah. So just trying to get some clarity on that. I've asked the question a lot over the years, and we've never really shifted it. And I'm not, you know, not here to shell peanuts. That's the single biggest gain that we can make, regardless of three waters and whatever. I get that whole thing, is that we fundamentally, particularly for transport investment and you know, even social infrastructure, we need to shift the balance to develop.
So I'll give it a go. So first up, we are changing the way we look at what growth projects are versus levels of service and renewal projects. So we're doing that up front now. So we're collecting that information now when we have a capital project put into the program. So we're going to be asking up front not waiting till the end, not sort of sliding it through at the end as a stew, trying to fix it up at the end. Sorry. Yeah, so much more upfront. We're being really specific about what the definitions are. So, you know, sharing that with the project managers, you know, making sure that we're getting that percentage right. You'll see that when you see the list of capital projects, so you can challenge it as well. Because at the moment, the development contributions policy, it must be in the capital projects, it must be classified as growth. And not every project is 100% growth. It might be only 20%, and might be actually all three types. It might be partly renewal.
Yeah,
might
no, I get that.
So,
So when
getting
we're,
that percentage is right.
when we're specifying, I mean, is there some way in the LTP we can actually specify as that split based on projects? So I mean, we've never had that level of upfront. I'm not saying it's not there, but it's not particularly visible. You know, that you've got your table, you've got your project, and you've got your 10 years over which years it falls into. Can there be a column at the end that's got a little pie chart or something that shows you how it's split? You know, how the debt split.
Yeah, we've always captured that. And I think what you're sort of saying is you want to understand.
I want to see it. I want to, and I want people to see it. And I think it's really important.
Just to emphasise what Kevin said there, the way we've set it up, and we're using Sentient project management tool to capture all of the CapEx submissions, and that growth versus renewal versus levels of services and upfront piece of information, that also has to come with some logical justification, which then gives us the ability to expose it all to you. Not 100% sure it'll be a pie chart, but it'll have.
Well, it's also what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to do a pie chart. No, I'm telling you to make it obvious what it is.
It will.
It's a arguable case saying that, you know, because the trouble is, what is the blob on the page and when does that happen? And, you know, for our investment strategy. So are we not, and in terms of development levels, we're not able to go back up a level and say, well, we, over this 10 years, we know we will get this amount of growth, and wherever that is, let's say within the basin, we know we're going to have to spend X amount on this type of facility. So we've actually got a 1 unit of growth equals 1 unit of whatever in terms of investment, but across the basin. And we actually just, that way we can respond to where that growth is happening, because it doesn't matter where it happened, we've already identified I guess a white box approach to what we would need to invest.
So we can't currently do that under legislation at the moment. So until the legislation changes, until it changes the development levy, we can't bring it up a level.
So but development levels will allow us
project in the long-term plan.
Development levels will allow us to do that.
No discretion.
But with levies?
With levies, we'll be able to. Yep, we'll be able to lift it up and have a Wakatipu wide or up a Clutha.
So that would help a lot with that uncertainty as to what's going where and what might need to be invested in.
And we will spend a bunch of time at the next workshop diving into the whole DCDL policy and definition.
It's probably important to note, just on the back of that conversation as well, as we sort of split the QLDC of the future and the water, there is quite different growth profiles there as well, right? So QLDC of the future, based on the current numbers, is around water growth, and then the water is 50%. It's quite different how we're going to be looking at it.
Yeah, but I mean, we clearly need to ramp up our transport investment, and so while it creates an opportunity, it doesn't take away the need for investment. And so, yeah, there'll be a big chunk of new work. And look, the other side of loading development is increases revenue, which allows us to do more, which allows us to, you know, so it's
as long as the right people pay.
As long as the right people pay, we can't squeeze the same limit.
Cool. So some changes that we've got coming up, or for consideration anyway. So we know those two big changes that we have. We're going to, as we set the LTP, we'll go through more of an activity-based planning. That'd be quite good, as was discussed before, just to sort of see the cost or the revenue and the cost from those activities. And obviously we've got the split of water as well. From we've just covered this, but obviously development levies coming in, and we need a lot of work go into that to sort of see how they look from year 2. We are updating our revenue and financing policy as well, so I would encourage you just to be real mindful of this. We are going to have sessions with the elected leaders throughout this process. It is the first time since I think 2012 that we've done a comprehensive review, so it's pretty important, as we said, why before, about what the revenue and financing policy is for. It's just to get that mix between the users and the ratepayers and developers as well.
So if you wanted to have more differentials, if you wanted to have more visitor paying charging, that's the opportunity, part of that financing policy, to make sure that the user is paying more.
To that point, have you done any work on that since the last session?
No, because we're going to go to the market. I think I'll be the help us.
Okay, and then moving into the next section there. So there is the ability with growth councils to increase our debt levels.
All right, can we just back to the previous slide, fiscal limits and debt limit. Our balance sheet's going to shrink a lot once we hive off the water. And it's going to take about 500 million of debt with it, right? Out of 700 million.
Not that much, 40%.
Oh, 40% of the debt?
Yeah.
So, and presumably some of the revenues will migrate over there too, right? So we've got about 200 million and 280 million in revenues right now, or 160. Sorry.
Yeah, got a slide coming up.
Okay.
Can we come back to
Those
that?
numbers.
What's that?
Can we come back to that as a slide in a couple of slides?
Coming to it.
Yeah.
Say again, but
There's a slide coming up.
yeah, okay, fine. Oh, fair enough. Okay, good.
So it's just really having
All right.
a further question around that, I suppose.
Oh, fine. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this here is just sort of signposting. There is options for both councils to go up to 350% of the debt limits. That's the major financial covenant that we have with the RGFA. And obviously we've got the proposed rates target modelling coming in as well. So it's another potential consideration that we have too. And then the final bit that we've got with proposed changes is just looking at financial assurance. So for us, it's just carrying out, so internally, with officers just carrying out some capital assurance, and it's basically for us just to help us to identify the financial risk that we have with the CapEx program too.
On me. You've seen this obviously slide before. Just to, because we're going to talk about what your appetite is. Just a reminder that this is kind of bubbling in the background, and obviously they've got a band. Initially, got a band of 2 to 4%, but there will be some individuality per district, seemingly, because we're special. We may not have to stick within that band. But it's just to put that slide in there, just to remind you of that.
I think it's important to note that the target band is a band, it has a lower bound. So there will be a lower bound of rates increases set. So essentially it means that 0 increase is not, won't be allowable under the new regime. There will be a minimum you have to increase rate by to make sure you're keeping up with inflation.
Averaged over time.
It's not. Per example, but we're not sure yet.
It's not.
Right.
So use that slogan during elections.
Yes. Like government.
Just kidding.
Okay, and just recapping that down there is 2%. So this is what I was referring to before. So conscious there is a lot of numbers here, but this is how you'll start to sort of shape up as we go through the activity reporting. These numbers here are based on the year 3 annual plan, so just the draft now, but it gives you an indicative indication of where we are going into the LTP. So we talked about the debt headroom before. So we've got a ratio when we go up to 280. Okay, so the indicative numbers of where we'll be when we go into the start of the LTP, as our debt limits will be at 175%. And that's just shown by over in that column on the right. So the last one I've got there, that's the QLDC of the future. That's with us without water. And so as we work our way down, we get our rates line, other revenue. For LGFA, you've got to take off vested assets and DCs, and then we have our debt position there. Okay. So Q, to your question before, we'll have about a debt there of 400 odd million. Okay, with the revenues of 242.
Right, but here's what I don't understand, that 242 will be the, so total revenue 262, right? Right?
It's total revenue.
Yeah, 262. But what am I missing here? Because when we create the water CCO, they're going to want revenue also. They're going to say some of that's ours, right?
So this is 370.
Okay, so what their revenue? All right, so their revenue will be
108.
108.
Okay.
262.
So we're going to balloon their balance sheet.
Oh, that's heavily indebted when it goes over. Yeah.
And sorry, Patty, now that percentage is now going from 175, we're allowed to go up to 350, not 280.
Noting the rates limit that we have.
I understood that, but
noting Quinton's comment on affordability to it.
right, but the 350% now just applies to us as non-three waters.
Yeah.
Percent. Okay, thank you.
And remember that little pie graph that I showed you, which shows you the quarter of your OPEX or your rating costs as interest.
Yeah.
So yes, if you double your borrowing, you're probably going to end up.
Is there a significant difference between the debt life, though, for different assets, like the community services asset? You know, is a community hall got a 35-year life and a pipe in the ground got a 60-year life or something? Is that
feeds
you've
through
accounted for that?
Yeah.
Depreciation picks up on it.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this activity reporting, because all those other columns in there, the first three are relating to water. The rest of those columns relate to the activities, and you can really start to drill into that, for example.
And is that also picked up in the renewal cost? Because obviously different infrastructure types have got significantly different renewal costs as well.
Yeah. So that all comes through between the OPEX and the CAPEX speed as well. And going back to where our team was that 30-year modelling, that's basically we're trying to get a good handle of when we're going to pay that debt off.
Am I correct in assuming that the non-three waters debt would largely have a shorter debt life than three waters debt?
Well, there's one outlier, which is the weather tightness. We need to make a decision how long
you drag that out. Well, that doesn't have a life, infrastructure life. That's got a
it's just a
philosophical decision as to how quickly you pay back. Yeah, it's got a debt life. Yeah.
Yeah, but then I think that's when the conversation will start to come into ICSP, transport, waste, and community services.
I just had a question around again back to the debt. Are we limited as to where we can borrow that debt from?
No,
probably one of Q's just ask one of Q's questions.
But
we're not limited.
We're not. We get lower rates through the AGM.
Understood.
Yeah,
but there's no limit on where else we could go. No. If Q was to find
you can ask our treasury advisor this afternoon.
Can't wait.
You can ask the treasury advisor this afternoon, the finance committee. But yeah.
And I guess probably other consideration then is what security.
Yeah, understood.
The vertical slice that you've done on debt and on revenues for the new world of three waters, is that contestable? See what I'm saying? Well, I mean, if you look at the balance sheets down here at the bottom, let's say I'm a new candidate coming into the CCO, and I'm coming into this gigantic balance sheet of debt. And I say, no, not fair. I don't like the way you did this. When I say contestable, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
You're the shareholder, so you're determining how much goes over. But this currently is in the water services delivery plan. This is the debt that is supposed to go to the water services entity.
It's currently the
ring fenced, so this just transfers over the debt that is through.
And this is part of the work that's gone into that water service delivery plan, and that's been accepted as well.
Yeah. So it's not contestable in that sense, because we've already had to comply with the legislation that ring fences the water debt, and we've already disclosed that through the water service delivery plan.
Which has been signed
by
the minister.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining a food fight later on.
Oh, yeah, it's presentation the other week and yeah, we're wishing with this.
You can choose to keep some of it, by the way, and not give it all to the. But it's very clear what the water related debt is. It is ring-fenced, but you could choose to keep some of it. Yeah. It doesn't go the other way. You can't give it.
Okay. So, what is your financial appetite? We'd be curious. This is going to help us to bring back the activity plans in a couple of workshops. If you indicate a really low number, then we will have to relook at all our services. If you want to just laissez-faire and just let it go, then you might be a bit shocked when you get to the end. So it's kind of giving that balance about where it is, and taking in mind that the previous financial strategy had the first 2 years was 16% and then going down to 10% for rates.
Just a question on that. Is that an average or is that
it's an average. And then the other thing I've just put in here around user pays, we tend to, obviously during the LTP, we restart and look at what costs and go, this is what the revenues we need to achieve to pay for that to meet the revenue and financing policy. So, just when we go to the revenue and policy next month, just keeping in mind, if you really want to be really aggressive, which some councils are, they're going 100% user pays, then that obviously enables us to charge less for rates. So just thinking if you're going to set a rates increase cap that you wanted to factor, just think about at the same time just how much you want to push onto the user. That was why I stuck that on the slide. And then obviously borrowing, more borrowing you're doing, the more interest and principal you're going to have to prepay. So again, that affects the rates. So they're kind of all connected, balancing. Yeah. So I'd be interested in your guidance.
I was just going to say that, well, it's hard to know without knowing what I'm just looking at Simon here, the swimming pools are a good example, as we know that if we put it all on users, it'd be probably pretty unaffordable. I don't know what the ticket price would be, but it'd be the double.
$20.
Yeah, so half of it's covered, under general service provision, but then there's other things, which I've raised before, like ramp fees, for instance, where we're clearly both under recovering and under charging, and there's a clear user group. So I mean, I think there's it's hard to know without the specific circumstances, but if we should be looking for user pays in an affordable way, but we just got to know what the criteria are. But I was just going back to that thing about rates. I mean, and just to Cody's point, I mean, although it's one thing to have an average rates target, I think there's other things involved there, like maximum rate targets and stuff like that. But it's complex because sometimes there's good reason for that. If you're providing a new service, for instance, like with a sewage, where they have had sewage, or you're providing a targeted rate for the town centre improvements or something like that, so I just think, but for the average rate payer across the district, that there have been massive outliers, where people are up over 25%, where residential was one a couple of years ago. We just got some massive irregularities that impacted smaller parts of the community more than others,
So that comes
and obviously
back to
live in one of our areas.
reviewing our rates. So that comes back to that procurement that we're going to be doing to get someone to help us to review all our rates, because we do have really complex rating, lots of targeted rates, a lot of differential rates. So the more you put in those, the more outliers you're going to get.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we can simplify that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Do you think we should?
yeah, it's very complicated, and you can't even tell how things
We
are
can't do it before this time?
Well, it's a subset. So once you do your activity plan, we'll then work out, part of that will be where's your revenue coming from, and it's got to come from rates, and then how do we then allocate that? What's fair to an allocation method?
It is interesting because, like, obviously I'm struggling with the rates increases. There's a lot of rural communities that are outside that are like it's up to 29% on some. And I think part of trying to get my head around, genuinely lost sleep on this, is like what's centralized is socialized, and then what's not is added on top of it again. So I think like rural communities can't sustain this constant. Everyone should pay for, you know, the centre stuff, and then they should pay for their own things as well. So we have to pick a lane. It's you either pay for your own infrastructure or you don't. But
I think really all we can hope for is that you answer this in principle, because I think equitable is something that's is coming through as really important, and that's a really good guide for us. But I guess this is the moment, if you bear in mind that the ORC staff were suddenly advised that they were targeting zero rates. I guess this is the moment to say, look, we actually want, I mean, if you put it in terms of, you know, do we want to take a really conservative approach, or are we prepared to sort of land somewhere in the mid-range? You know, that we're not allergic to 10% if there's good rationale and we've applied, you know, all of the process and prioritisation work to land there. I mean, this is just in principle if you had a view now, but it's hard for you to know, I guess.
Very difficult at the moment.
Yes.
The user pays one, it all comes down to the nuance of where that user pay lands and who pays what, and how much. And without having a good consultation with the ones who end up paying, it's quite hard for us to steer on that. But I guess you always end up in the middle somewhere. The borrowing one is the other one. You know, the 280% going up to 350 was obviously a blunt tool for central government to go central government, local government to borrow more and you can pay for it yourself.
But then they're taking away the revenue side by taking away the revenue side.
So does that
give them some revenue to?
I'm just wondering, does that get them off the hook a little bit if we go, let's just borrow 350% for the likes of active travel, for example, where it's been taken out? Well, a lot of central government funding is missed out on active travel, then might go to local government to go, well, we think that's extremely important for our transport. And so we end up funding that because we can borrow it. So it's a lot of nuance in this stuff. I'll probably end up landing straight back in the middle.
Which is?
How this process works, and we have to give you some guidance, and the time is wonderful. And so we've got 3 questions there, so I think we probably need to get a bit structured about what we're giving you back. Otherwise, we're going to lose control because they're just going to assume as they should.
Yes, but I would also approach it from an outcome space, you know, for what is our financial appetite. You know, we actually can't have that widening gap between, you know, what's being built and our ability to provide the infrastructure and community services. Yeah, so, you know, and if we are, you know, if we are going to go at the 10%, you know, we've got to be able to show what difference is actually making. It's not just more operational costs. It's, you know, it has to be tangible stuff so that people can see what they're getting for their money. It's a value proposition. People will pay if they can see what they're getting for it. So that's probably got to be the challenge in a lot of this. Doesn't answer the question, but approaching what our risk or our financial appetite is from what we want to achieve. It's how I would start.
And I suppose I take it back to that point before. I mean, we just cannot squeeze the level too much harder around. So while yes, there are levels of service choices that we make, and as you say, that's the value proposition. We just fundamentally have to shift the balance. We have to. We cannot be, and you know, the visitor levy, the development contributions, the or development levies and stuff like that. They have to be the place we go. We cannot squeeze this lemon any harder.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm just going to start then with, and I don't know if we can make this decision or give this guidance today because we might need more time to chew it over, but you guys need to know so that you can move forward. So I'm just going to start with my thing. I would like us to head more towards user pays, but that doesn't mean complete user pays. I agree with Cody's sentiment. We've got to think about the outlying communities. They have to pay $40 to drive into use a facility. They can't bike there. So they cannot be funding to the same extent as the people living next door. That's not fair. So I think we need to look at more use. Rates increase, I would like to stay within the rate cap formula. I'd like to not be at 10%. I'd like to stay at 4%. I'm really conscious of what the water CCO is doing. My focus is on looking at what is the household paying at the end of it. I don't think we can be separate. So we need to look at what we think the water CCO is going to have to pay, and then we need to work it back. I wouldn't like us to go over the 4 at this point, and it's going to require some belt tightening, but I'd like to see what that looks like. On borrowing, I think we've got an awful lot of stuff that we need to build for growth. I'm quite happy to go beyond if the right people are paying for the interest on that borrowing and for the borrowing. So it all depends on who we're putting the costs on. With the current DC policy and the current rates policy, I'm not happy going above 280, but if we adjust it so the right people pay, I'd be happy to go beyond so that we can cater for growth. That's my thing.
Nice. John? Yeah, I'd like to see in that user pays question, I would like to see a solid use of a public versus private good analysis of each of those services along the lines of what Quentin's saying. So some of these things we need to do, wouldn't use the services if they were fully user pays. Others, they should be because they've got a commercial aspect, but then there might be a regulatory benefit to it. So I think we need to take a more systematic approach to that. I agree with Nikki around needing to look at the whole picture of costs, including the 3 water stuff, and to keep that as low as possible, but maximise, leverage any new funding or revenue mechanisms available that are probably some of them unique to us, potentially, if they become available, like a local visitor levy, and making the most of the, so I suggested as far as borrowing, given the current parameters, up to 300. But if there are other mechanisms available to where we need to pay for growth, and we have mechanisms to do so, then yeah, push it out to the top limit, but only if we have the mechanism to fund that.
So is that 4%?
Pardon?
With that 4% rate increase?
Yeah, just work within those parameters, yes. Whatever they end up being for us, which I suspect might be slightly higher.
I want to see how users pays, so the differential pricing. I think determining a rate payer versus a user payer needs to be acknowledged when we're considering user pays. Then I want to change rating to align with incentives more so than fairness, I guess, because we have long let the incentives run for people to land bank, to people to withhold doing a lot of things, and it's paid for by the community ultimately. Conservative on rates increases, given it's always been the most topical thing, and I want to find mechanisms to fund new social infrastructure, because I know that everybody who's wanting to be a part of it, that's Samantha's prerogative, is keen to fund the sports fields and the turf, so we don't have a mechanism to capture that and to do it in a good way. So that's the point.
Social infrastructure.
Social infrastructure.
Funding the framework
Yeah.
to allow us to.
Yeah.
I would rather we sort of we fund by provision of land if there's other people that do the capital work.
Yep.
Yeah, that's sort of different way of doing things. I think we're growing, so there'll be some stuff, but we should be able to show the economy of scale as we're growing, as we're getting bigger. Things should be more efficient and they should be cheaper. So I don't necessarily see how we verbalise that. Also, what are opportunities are for shared services, what are the opportunities for saving costs, some of these things that we're being encouraged to do between councils.
Just my 2 cents. I'm a little bit against user pays, and unless it is relatively well targeted. I think I agree with Cody's point to say, we don't want to increase the cost for the people who actually live in this district for the sake of saving the people who pay rates who don't live in this district. So that's one thing. My other thing is around any rates increase. I'm concerned with putting some sort of cap or thing around us when you know, in order to achieve that, we put off things we actually do need to be doing. That's happened for the last 20 to 30 years. We put off things and now it's catching up. And I don't want us to end up in 20 years' time to be in exactly the same position. So whilst I'm keen not to you know, have rates go rampant and go through the roof, there's things we're going to have to pay for. I don't want to put that constraint right around us, you know, right at the get-go, because that drives different behaviours. So that's my thoughts on that.
And my only comment to that is the reason we've been doing that is because we've been subsidising growth in tourism. And so that's what, you know, ratepayers have been subsidising growth in tourism, as simple as that.
On that, I'd really like to look at the levies that go to the RTOs. Tourism, whatever. I think we need to look at that visual. Can I have one more thing? It's just around, oh, you go. I thought
I echo what Steve's saying in terms of that user pays. I don't think there's we can't just say just EPI or just user pays. I do actually think we need to be looking at more of the detail to be able to provide more direction there, because I do think they're all different. Do you know what I mean? They're all completely different. So I don't think we can have a one size fits all. Same with the rate cap. I echo exactly what Steve is saying, in the sense that it's not a one size fits all. Yes, in an ideal world, we would be at the 3% all of the time. When we're over, it needs to be for a very valid reason and very clear as to what is being achieved with that. And with regards to the borrowing, yeah, again, I think it has to be looked at. It can't just be like, oh, this is our, or do you need a goal? Does it need to have a goal in the?
It just means that, you know, we might borrow for things more than we, if you wanted to keep it at 280, then we would not borrow so much. So it's just a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, but yeah.
Personal accounts, isn't it? You're happy to borrow money on houses because they appreciate, but we shouldn't be buying, you know, expensive cars because they appreciate. That's not the problem. It's the
You just said that we're way behind, we're decades behind on infrastructure. The fact is we have to catch up. And the way we're going to catch up is some sort of revenue generation. And so I support borrowing to the max, because in fact, what is 350 today, in 10 years' time, it's going to be 100. Because the fact of the matter is our population is growing so fast. We're doubling every 14 years. That we're always going to be, well, that 350 is always going to be getting less.
I know.
As we borrow
I
again.
think I was agreeing with you, because I was saying that I don't think that's the problem, provided we've got the avenues to pay for it. And as I said, the avenues are visitor levies and development levies. You know, that's where our cash cow is.
And the other thing is that Stephen said, you know, I mean, there's 2 to 4%. It sounds like the old Reserve Bank, you know, the 0 to 2%. It's a blunt instrument that is just that blunt instrument. And I think it's just a headline. I think it's just a it's just a grab. Because in fact, I could make a case, nobody's going to like this, why we should increase rates by 10% every year for the next 3 years. Because we are growing so fast, we have so much catching up to do. And because effectively, New Zealand has one of the lowest tax rates globally. We still have a really low tax rate. We're barely above Chile. We're something like 40th in the world. So, you know, people get a pretty good deal here. And we have a really high inflation rate for the council when you look at steel and asphalt and cement, which is way in excess of CPI or, you know, or PCI, whatever, or PPI. So I think a lot of it, sorry to keep going around the room, is what John said, is communication. Here's why your rate's going up, you know, and we need to scream that.
Yep. The user pays part of it. We've got a funding and financing policy which sets out all those, the differentials between how much is paid at a rates and how much is user charges. I don't think we should be looking at throwing that out. And maybe there's some of those that we could look at actually changing those percentages, but on a case by case basis. But generally, they've been fairly well thought out, I think, over a long period of time. The rates increase. I actually think we do generally have quite a low the total rate is quite low for households. When you compare it to other comparable expenses for a household like insurance and power bills, you get a lot of service for your rates, I think, and it has been historically too low. And also, there's this whole focus on percentage increases and comparing councils against each other. There's no rational conversation about how much you get in this district compared to how much you get in other districts, and what the actual total cost is of the rates bill over a year. So, I think it'd be good to try and keep within that cap. That's obviously coming, but if there's reasons to be higher than that, and there has to be reasons to be higher than that, then I'd be happy to look at those. And borrowing, we're not happy to keep it low. I don't think 350% is actually that high either against the income, but I think it would be something to keep in your back pocket for specific uses, certain projects, rather than just going to a blanket 350 for the sake of it.
Anyone else? Nicola?
Okay, I feel like I agree with everyone, so that's uncomfortable.
But I don't think 4%. I think I agree that we're too far behind. So I'm more on the 10%, but I don't feel comfortable with those small communities paying 29%. So I don't know how that can be adjusted. I just have a dumb question. If next year you say we've got more room to do stuff because the water services is going away, but I do agree with you is that we have to look at what they charge and what we charge as a household thing. But could you borrow more this year so we're not at 10% and then you pay back more the next year, and instead of building a community centre or something that is a nice to have, we pay more back then and then you adjust so we're in the 4% range then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the 350, if we want to go up to it, is a bespoke arrangement. So it is working with your financer there. If we go through the LGFA, and that's just a process to go through. So the practicality is probably still from the 1st July next year, because we need to have all these projects within your CapEx program as well. That's how we're juggling that to enable that.
But there is a balance to be struck, Nicola. I mean, we've used it as a really useful tool to fund, so that future generations are funding debt. So, a swimming pool gets paid for over the next 20 years. So, there's got to be some rationale for what we're doing to invoke debt, logic to that. They can't just offset the rates, I guess, if that's what you were thinking. But the other thing I just wanted to clarify is that the interest that we pay on debt is actually something that does get picked up through rates. So there's still a cost. It's not like it just goes away.
Yeah, I was going to ask Matt.
I think I've already spoken.
Okay, Heath, you've joined us. Any input?
You can join.
What is it? Those three questions.
Sorry, without hearing the conversations.
What's your comfort level on debt limits?
The user pays increases. I'd like to backload that on the margin that we need to make out of them. We could look at it that way. So I'm not too worried about any increases there. Rates percentage increase. Yeah, I mean, as low as possible, I suppose. I think is what the community wants from us. That sort of comes back again still to the, are we right size the organisation, and are we getting value for money, what we're spending our rates on, I suppose. But I would prefer to sort of try to operate from the rates cap formula if we could, rather than big increases. Take a point that rates in the Queen and QLDC are cheap comparatively across the country. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. And and borrowing, I would like it to be a max limit, no higher than 280, I think. I'd like to see, I guess what I don't understand yet, what I haven't got across yet, is what our debt repayment plan and policy looks like. We're not seeing future forecasts of what our debt level is going to look like. It just goes up and up. Let's see it coming down if possible, given the carrying cost of that debt.
So perhaps just a nuance with what he said there, but just want to clarify, we don't have a margin or anything. I'm sure you was talking about a public-private split. We don't charge margins or anything. Can we,
No, I guess I'd say what are the user pays revenue lines that we
cost recovery on that private and public water rates. So we don't put a margin on anything. So be clear on that. It's just a cost recovery.
Last call, because I
Yeah.
think most of us got things to go
From
through.
what base point? Because obviously we've had much higher rates, so did I miss something? Like, it's just from the non-through waters
Yeah.
percentage
the-
increase and then, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if you got your direction.
That's great.
You've probably got,
Great.
12 different directions.
And it solves that question as well.
So-
It sounded like you wanted to have water services delivery plan as a household kind of visibility in the financial strategy, so we'll work on that. Yeah.
Can I just ask how we're going to deal with the community funding policy section that we haven't seen?
It's just with the sounding size is what I'm talking about.
Oh, you know, no, I
I was just gonna say, yeah, we can bring it next time and just merge it somewhat with
We talked about, we should talk about that.
Yeah, which is next agenda.
Otherwise, they might get
Yep.
Sorry,
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting we should stick around. It's like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Okay.